Hey there, happy Sunday to you all. We'll see how many people show up on a holiday weekend here in the United States on a Sunday. Most people are either off vacationing or partying or what have you. It's probably one of the most popular vacation holidays here in the United States. I myself, being a homebody and being a person who I like to live where I would choose to vacation, so that's just how I do things. I don't get me wrong, I like to vacation, but I prefer to live where I would want a vacation anyway. So that's kind of how I live my life. So okay, so today we're going to be talking about a lot of things. Of course, that'll depend on how many people show up and how many questions we get, but I got plenty of content here lined up. Even if nobody shows up, I'll have a lot of things I want to talk about. So we're talking about awakening your spiritual powers. And what are spiritual powers? Well, the truth of the matter is that everything is a spiritual power, even if it's you've got a knack for business, or if you've got a knack for money, or if you've got a knack for physical fitness, or if you've got a very sharp mind, you've got a knack for science, for engineering. Those are also spiritual powers as well, because you know, everything is made up of energy. Everything, therefore, is made up of spirit. But we tend to have ideas about what spirituality is, and so when we talk about spiritual powers, we're talking about the powers that connect us to the other side of reality, the other realm of reality. You know, I was thinking about this, you know, just recently. You know, when you start looking for spirituality spiritual phenomena, one of the first places that people go to is to go to I have to turn my volume down here. Looks like it might be too loud. One of the first places that people go to is ghosts. So that's why there's such a huge uptick in interest in ghost hunting. And so some people they do that to have fun and have an exciting experience, and some people do it because that is where they feel as though they're connecting to something spiritual. But you know, that's you know, just because you're communicating with a ghost doesn't necessarily mean that you're having any truly spiritual experience. In fact, quite the opposite. You might be having an experience that's keeping you trapped in your illusions. You know, because remember that ghosts are like the homeless people of the universe. You know, they're the easiest to connect to. You know, because they're the ones that want to be all in your face about it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they know anything on a spiritual level. They're stuck. You know, it's like trying to connect with the crazy homeless person on the corner and asking him about wisdom. I mean, you know, he's going to babble on and on and on, and every now and then something of value might come out simply because he's got a different perspective on things. But, you know, really when it comes down to it, this is somebody who doesn't have the ability to function very well. Same thing with ghosts. Ghosts really are not, you know, and I guess I'm pointing this out because, you know, I've known people who, you know, they get like recorders so that they can record EVPs, and they'll ask questions. You know, this is what, you know, the difference between, say, divination and working with a Ouija board. Huge difference. Divination is working with the higher spirits, the gods. You know, this is why runes are divination. I would prefer to work with runes. You know, I'm not a tarot reader, but it's the same idea, as opposed to working with a pendulum. You know, people work with a pendulum and they ask questions. In fact, there was a woman that contacted me not too long ago who claimed to have demon problems because she was playing with a pendulum. And you know, pendulum itself isn't necessarily a problem if you're connected well, but I was asking her, what were you doing? Well, I was just obsessed with asking questions and wanting to know about this and wanting to know about that and what is this. And so I would ask the pendulum, and I said, so it's just like an addiction. You were trying to get out of yourself, out of your feelings. And so you're so desperate for some kind of spiritual connection that you will use a Ouija board or, that kind of thing, just because you can have some kind of non-physical presence communicate with you, and somehow that makes you feel like you're having a spiritual experience. It's not. The only difference is you're dealing with an intelligence that doesn't have a body. Again, this is like when people flip out, they have ghosts in their house and they won't go into certain rooms in their house. And I'm like, well, what if that was a homeless person? You would call the cops, or you would go in and yell at them and drive them out. But when it's a ghost, simply because it doesn't have a body, we get all flipped out and ooh. The ghosts are just like anybody else. You walk in and you tell them, hey, this is my house, get the hell out. You don't belong here. And they respond to it, they get away with what you let them get away with. So anyway, that's a whole other subject. But so point is that we get attached to the idea of spiritual powers being things that have connections to non-physical reality. So psychic powers, powers of empathic powers, abilities to connect to the gods, the ability to see ghosts and communicate with ghosts, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be talking about what these spiritual powers are. Powers of energy, powers of healing, powers of wisdom, shamanic abilities to be able to see into the other realms of existence. These are just some of the psychic powers or spiritual powers that are out there. You see, I Freudian slipped. I went right into psychic. That's the first place people go. Spiritual powers, being psychic. Again, I could talk about that. And I guess maybe we'll talk about, why don't we do that? Let's talk about what are the mechanics of psychic abilities. So people get really hooked on the third eye, opening up the third eye. Well, opening up the third eye definitely has the ability to connect you to other realms of existence. But the third eye isn't necessarily psychic power. You might not believe what I'm about to tell you, but psychic powers actually, when we call psychic, like what is he thinking, what is she thinking, what is going to happen, that kind of thing. These actually come from our lower chakras. People didn't realize it. People are doing all this effort to try and open up the third eye, most of which are fruitless. It's a waste of time focusing on your third eye and trying to do that's not going to open your third eye. But when it comes to true psychic ability, like going to asking a psychic, what is my future, what's going to happen to me, what is he thinking or she thinking about me, that's actually the lower centers. That's specifically, we're talking about the navel center, and I'll explain why that is. So the human being is made up of 3 spiritual centers. You're actually made up of 3 souls. You've got a higher self, you've got a middle self, and you've got a lower self. I'm touching my navel right now. And the majority of the so-called spiritual powers don't come from up here or even here. They come from the navel center. That's why in Chinese martial arts and in meditation people focus on their navel. It's because that's where all that power is. So here's how communication comes. Now, you can sometimes get communication directly from your higher self. That does happen. But there is a sequence through which this energy is transmitted and translated, because we also need to translate this energy into ways that we can understand. So sometimes, people talk about being clairaudient and all that kind of stuff, but the majority of the spiritual communications that come to us in energetic forms, sort of like thought packets, and then we have to interpret that. So what happens is that energy will come to our higher self first, and then the higher self will take that information and send it to the lower self, which contains your unconscious and subconscious minds. Those are 2 different minds. People get those mixed up. There's the subconscious, and then the one beneath that is the unconscious. Anyway, we're not going to get into that today. But that is where that energy goes to, what we call the lower self. Then the lower self sends that packet of information. It has taken it in and it has converted it to an emotional energy. And then that sends that energy to the heart center, and then the heart center is where we convert it into our thoughts, our language, feelings that we can understand, and then we verbally communicate it. That's why I'm going to say something, again, might offend some people, I hope not. Have you ever noticed that a lot of psychics in bookstores are really overweight? They're really into, sometimes they smoke a lot of cigarettes, or they drink, or they do drugs, or they're very into their body. They're very, they're actually kind of weighed down by it. It's because their lower self is what's doing all the work. So this is, when it comes to psychic interpretation and divination, here's the problem. I know, because this is one of the things I do for a living. People call me up as a, quote, psychic, and I just use the runes. I do intuit a lot of things, but if somebody has a specific question, I'll look at the runes and I'll just simply translate what's in front of me there, interpret what's sitting in front of me. But the problem is that you never know where the information is coming from. I shouldn't say never. You oftentimes don't know where the information is coming from, because your lower self also communicates with other people's lower selves. This is why, you can sort of get a gut feeling about what somebody's really thinking and feeling. It's coming from your gut, literally. So you have this feeling in your gut that tells you something. Your intuition starts to tell you something. So if somebody is if somebody is asking for a psychic reading, and they have a really strong emotional attachment to the outcome of that reading, the psychic can be influenced by that through their lower self. I know this firsthand. I remember, this was a long time ago. I don't go to psychics anymore for this reason. Number one reason, is because what happened here? Okay, we're back online now. Okay, so there must be a lot of traffic. I went offline there for a second. So I was going to illustrate what happens when you go to a psychic. I went to a psychic years ago, and I wanted to know about my love life. And what ended up happening is that the psychic, knew nothing about me. So there's no way they could have known. She could have known some of the details. But she started to map out in detail my ultimate fantasy about who I was going to meet, when I was going to meet them, and what was going to happen. And she even said, mark my words, it's going to happen. And none of it happened. But what opened my mind is that she was definitely psychically intuiting my fantasies, and in ways that she couldn't have known. So that's what opened me up to the idea that, yeah, psychic phenomena happens, but lots of times it's just two people's unconscious minds, which means your fantasies and your fears. So this is one of the things you got to be aware of. True psychic ability, you've got to have the detachment to not care whether or not you tell a psychic a client what they want to hear. You've got to be willing to not, have an attachment, not have an attachment to whether or not they like you. This is the problem. You work with psychics, usually you're paying them by the minute or something. So they're going to want to keep you on that hook for as long as possible. I'm not one of those people. When people call me, I tell them the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. Anyway, that's just me though. So, psychic ability. So we're going to be talking about the planets and what their psychic connections are. So if you're just tuning into this is a Q&A, so I will be taking questions. Here's the best way to communicate with me. Please leave me a question. I know a lot of times people want to dump their opinion, or you guys want to talk with each other, and that's fine if you want to do that. It makes it harder for me to see the questions, because then I have to scroll through all of the intercommunications, or somebody who just needs to throw out their opinion. I have to scroll through that until I get to an actual question. So that's the best way. If you want to interact with me, leave me a question, and then I'll answer it. Otherwise, I won't. I'll pass by it. But let's first take a look at the different planets and some of the major gifts and powers that comes with each one of the planets, and then we'll talk about some of the placements that. Well, before I do that, I'll talk about some things that happened during the eclipse. But so let's take a look again. What's going on with each one of these planets and spiritual powers? Okay, so as I suspected, probably not going to be a lot of people on today because it is a holiday, and that's perfectly fine because there are plenty of stuff I want to talk about. So I want to talk a little bit about the eclipse that we just had, I talk a lot about how I've overcome a lot of physical difficulties and illnesses and all that kind of thing, and that's having to do with following your joy and all that. But I still am human, and I still am sometimes strongly affected by planetary scenarios. So this eclipse was big for me because the eclipse itself was in Leo, in the nakshatra of Magha, and as it turns out, that is my ascendant, meaning where everything comes together, and it has to do with your physical body. So we went through the eclipse, which of course had a strong impact on me in terms of my ego, myself, my physical body, all that kind of stuff. And then we just recently had Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Rahu in Leo. Now Rahu has just recently left Leo and is in Cancer, but in the beginning of this this month you had Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Rahu conjunct in the sign of Leo, and Mercury, of course, is retrograde. So there was a lot of planetary pressure going on for me, and in terms of my physical body, and sure enough, I had felt it coming on. My back was starting to get tight because there are some issues that have, personal stuff going on that I don't want to waste your time with, but that's been difficult for me to handle. And sure enough, I went out surfing the other day, and my back went out on me. Took off on a wave, stood up, and my back went. And so, just to let you know, these kinds of things are all emotionally based. Unless somebody has an actual physical disformity or injury, I would say 99.9% of all back problems are all emotionally based. What ends up happening is that when you have unconscious emotions like rage, or things that there's just something that's going on that you can't deal with, something going on in your life that makes you feel out of control, unsupported, those kinds of things. When the emotions get too intense to handle on a conscious level, they get pushed down into the unconscious mind, but then what happens is that they get physically expressed in the body. And so what happens is the mind shuts down blood flow, which is oxygen flow, to a certain part of the body. And what happens over, sometimes weeks, is that the muscles get starved of oxygen, and then they go into spasm. And this is all that happens most of the time. So, a lot of people go and they get back surgeries and all that. I've known people who do this. Doctor will tell you, oh, you've got a slip disc, or oh, you've got, pinched nerve. It's all nonsense. It just means that there's not enough oxygen going to the blood. It's called TMS, tension myositis syndrome. And so the only way to work through it is to Do whatever physical things you can to loosen the muscles up, but then you got to fix the emotional issues. So that's what I've been doing the past couple days. I've been lying on my back, lying on my back, going through all the things that I don't have control over in my life that I want to fix. So, luckily I do. Normally if this had happened to me 20 years ago, like it used to, I would have been out for 2 weeks. Would have been on my back for 2 weeks. But thankfully, I can get this fixed fairly quickly. Even though I'm in a lot of pain, not a lot of pain, even though I'm in a little soreness, I'm still able to walk around and function. Anyway, so, if you had an intense eclipse experience, just know you're not alone. All of this energy is going into Leo, which is the sign of the sun, so it has to do with the ego. It's different for everybody, but this is why, again, Donald Trump is in for, he's not done. All of the problems that have hit him from the result of this eclipse, and again, I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on. Okay, let's just drop that for a second. I'm just talking straight about what's happening here. There is a lot of pressure on, since the eclipse went over the United States, there's a huge amount of planetary pressure on those who are in power, the government. Technically, the sun means the king. The closest thing we get to the king is the president. So regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, you can agree that he is suffering a lot of criticism in the public eye. I mean, not only from his political enemies, but also even from people in his own party. He's attacking other people in his own party. He's fighting with them. And this isn't over with yet. What's actually going to happen is things are going to get worse. He's going to get judged more harshly because what is happening is, let me take a look here. What's happening is that we've got Jupiter, which is a spiritual planet. This is going to be has now gone into Virgo. Virgo is very analytical, so Virgo criticizes. So from Jupiter's perspective, Jupiter is going to start criticizing that, and then we see things moving into, at the end of the month, into Libra, and Libra is the judge. So we'll find out. Also, a lot more stuff is going to come to light. This is one of the things that's happening, is that this eclipse came over, and then what's happening as a result of the planets afterwards is that a lot of things are going to come to the surface. A lot of things that were secret, that were hidden, are going to come to light. If there is any actual damning evidence towards Trump, it's going to happen in the next 30 to 60 days. We're going to see a lot more of it. I don't know if it's going to actually, work itself out and ruin it, but we'll see. So hang on to your hat. We got a lot coming, and so of course this is going to have an impact on us as well. But anyway, so what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about spiritual powers in general, and I'll take any of your questions about that or anything else, and we'll talk about the planets and how they can influence that in your own chart. By the way, anybody, if you are interested in getting a Vedic astrological reading from me to find out what energies are working for you, just let me give you a couple examples. When people get readings from me, what will happen often is that somebody feels like they're either disconnected or they feel crazy. They don't feel connected to their body. They have a hard time in life, and I'll be able to look at the chart and see, well, that's really, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that, for instance, Ketu in the first house will make you feel disconnected from your body and make you, disconnect from your body shamanically. It'll actually give you a lot of shamanic powers. It can give you the ability to see ghosts, to see the other side, so those kinds of things. You're not crazy, you just got to know what's really going on. It's when you try and compare yourself to normal people. There is no such thing, but when you compare yourself to normal people and you don't understand what's happening with you in terms of how your energies are working, and you try and compare yourself to others, or you try and express to others what's going on with you, and they look at you like, you're crazy, something's wrong with you. So these are the kinds of things that I like to do when I do people's charts. So if you're interested, please go to astrology.thunderwizard.com, and just go and look at on the information there, and you'll find out what kind of stuff you can learn from that. So especially if you're interested in finding out what are your spiritual powers, that is probably the best way for me to figure that out and help you with that. And then what, by the way, then what I can do is I can give you remedies. So if you're having issues, planetary issues, I can tell you which planets to work with, which means which mantras, which deities, which energies, even things down to, you know, what kind of physical activities that you can do, which will balance these energies and give you, make that issue that makes it to you feel like a weakness, actually turn it into a strength. Anyway, so that's some of the things that we do. So let me do some ads here, some business for myself. I'll check and see if there are any questions, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, welcome back. All right, we do have a couple of questions here, so I'm happy to take a look at those. Starting with Alan H. says, can you speak to Odin as a magical master yet is strongly associated with the higher self? Okay, so if I'm reading that question correctly, what you want me to do is to connect those two ideas. So, you know, there's all different kinds of magic, right? There's higher magic and lower magic, and black magic and light magic, but in reality there's just energy. So if you're talking about magic in terms of what many people would associate as lower forms of magic, you're right, that has a strong connection to the lower self. You know, as I just got through talking about that, most psychic ability and most psychics are not getting their information from their higher self. They're getting information from their lower self. That's not a bad thing. That's just how energy works. Energy comes to our higher self. It gets taken down to our lower self. Lower self interprets it and sends it to our conscious self or our middle self. But sometimes the lower self just directly will get information. You know, sensing spirits, connecting with other people's thoughts. Sometimes that's just simply two lower selves communicating. So what does that have to do with the higher self? Well, Odin, this is an interesting because Odin is actually the highest form of the intellect. Now, the intellect is normally rebelling against the higher self because the intellect is trying to work with practical, down-to-earth things. And the truth of the matter is, the intellect cannot function outside of two dimensions. So that's why most of the people, when they get into religion, they want to boil things down to black and white issues. Everything is good or bad or right or wrong or here or there. You know, the Bible is literal, and you know the earth was created in 7 days. This is the intellect trying to deal with spiritual concepts. True spiritual concepts, deep spirituality, you know, there really are no words for it. And this is the job of the guru, the job of the teacher, the job of the wizard, is to try and put into words what these deep spiritual concepts are. But in reality, those words become vehicles through which the energy, the feeling of those concepts gets transferred, and the intellect gets caught up in trying to listen to the words, but the energy is sort of comes on, rides the wave of the word, and then goes into the rest of the self. So you have Odin here, who is definitely connected to the intellect, because Odin has a strong connection to Mercury. But like the gods themselves, the gods are not trapped within planetary confines. So even though there's a strong mercurial connection there, Odin actually is connected to everything. So, you know, as a magical master, yet is strongly associated with the higher self, he is very strongly associated with the higher self. So he's very, I won't say very similar, but there are some similar kinds of dynamic between Buddha, which is the avatar of Vishnu, the heart center, but is the mercurial aspect of the heart center. And so what you have is the people who are Buddhists are people who are trying to merge the intellect, which is two-dimensional, with the heart center. So Odin is the mercurial aspect that is seeking to take higher thought and make it infinite, traveling to all of the worlds. I'm doing a really poor job as I'm talking about it. I can hear Odin like going, no, that's not what I'm doing. So I'm trying my best to answer your question, but yeah, anyway, I hope I answered your question. All right, so somebody's trying to get my attention here. It is my beautiful girlfriend, so I will text her back in a little bit, but not at the moment. Okay, so let's see if there's any more questions. Can you speak to planetary worship, what that means, and examples of the practice? Well, planetary worship, you can worship the planets directly. In fact, the society in what is now Turkey that perfected this science, from which both the Vedic and Western astrology sciences come from, their whole religion was around worshiping the planets. You know, we have that obviously in other societies as well. You know, the Romans really worshipped the planet Jupiter. They really worshipped the planet Mars. Literally, the gods that they were worshiping were directly associated with those planets. So those are a couple of examples. You know, you worship the Roman god Jupiter, you're worshiping the planet Jupiter. You worship the Roman god Mars, you are worshiping the planet Mars. And you can work with the planets directly, but you can also work with deities. This is, again, when you get a Vedic astrological reading from me, what happens is that I will break down for you, specifically from your chart, which deities are associated specifically for you in your chart for the planets that need to be connected to. So, you know, for instance, for me, I have a strong connection to Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. As it turns out, the god Thor in the Norse tradition actually is the thunder god that vibrates most strongly with the Moon and Jupiter. You get Mars and the Sun in there as well, but that's where it gets really empowered. Now let's say you want to work with the thunder god, but you want to work more with a solar thunder god. Then you would want to worship Indra, because Indra is actually the moon. And, excuse me, Indra is actually the sun shining directly on the moon and Jupiter as well. So you get a lot more fiery aspect. So these are just some of the things that you can do, trying to figure out how to worship the planets and how to bring deities in. And some deities are just, like I said, directly associated with the planets. So to give you an example, Well, that depends again what's going on in somebody's chart. So I'll just tell you what's going on in my chart. In my chart, if I wanted to worship Mars, I've got Mars in Libra. So that means that Mars wants to be worshipped through the elements that come through Libra. Libra is Venus. Venus likes libations. You know, like sacrificial wine or sacrificial mead, or even just water or milk sometimes. And so what I would do to worship Mars is that I would put in front of me on the altar, as I'm chanting a mantra to a Mars deity, I would have in front of me specifically like some water, or, you know, depending on, you know, what the deity is, you put different things in the water, different spices. And then when you're done with the chanting and you're done with your communication with the deity, you would then drink that. Now, again, you're dealing with Venus, so the direction of Venus is the southeast. So specifically, I would face southeast, I would put a libation in front of me, and then I would do a specific mantra to a specific Mars deity, and then when I was done, I would drink that libation. That's one example. So this is how complicated it gets, and this is again why it's important to look at somebody's chart, because even though you can get benefits no matter how you worship, everybody is aligned in a certain way, and each one of the planets wants to be worshipped in a very specific manner. So that is something I can see by looking at somebody's chart. All right, so can you please talk about the rune magic and how does stave rune formulas are formed? Okay, so those are two big questions. Rune magic, you know, first off, you know, we have to put magic on the end of it. So it sounds like you're asking, how can you manipulate energies? How can you affect other people? How can you bring things into manifestation using the runes? So the runes themselves are not designed just for rune magic. The runes themselves are simply vehicles through which certain spiritual foundational energies that create the universe are transmitted. So the most powerful way to work with runes is just to work with the symbol and or to chant the rune. So for instance, if somebody wanted to increase their intuitive capacity and be able to channel energies or deal with the gods directly, then you would one of the runes you could use is Ehwaj, the horse rune. It looks like an M, and you would chant or you could chant Ehwaj, or you could write it or look at it or meditate on it. So that's, you know, how one of the ways that the runes work. There's rune divination. That's a totally different deal as well. Divination is you're connecting with the ascended masters, and you have some kind of a question, or you just want to have them communicate to you. We could talk a lot about that. I'll have to make just some videos on rune divination and all that. Rune magic is trying to take runes and impose onto your environment, onto other people, your wishes. So rune magic, you know, doesn't always work the way we want it to, because when you work with a rune, you end up also being influenced by it. So this is the problem when people want to do rune. You know, again, I don't know what your connection here is, what you want to achieve with that, but you know, if you're going to do rune magic, it should be simply for your own empowerment. It should not be used to try and affect the world, you know, trying to get rich through it or trying to curse somebody. You know, those things have all kinds of limitations that don't really work. They operate from the assumption that this world is really just here for you to arbitrarily force your intention onto it, and that's not entirely accurate. So how rune stave formulas are formed is just that. You know, if you want to mix different runes together in order to create a rune stave, or, you know, your own personal rune thing. So I could talk about that, but again, I found that a lot of that, even though that is something that was definitely practiced by our ancestors, I think a lot of the modern stuff, I think, is missing a lot of knowledge about it. And I think it's operating from a false, an incomplete assumption about what the runes are and how they function. So it's not so much, you know, for me, if I'm going to do rune magic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first tap in to see which runes are working with me, that want to work with me to either enlighten and empower me or to help resolve a situation. Then I will chant a rune, or I'll write it, or I'll place it, or I'll meditate on it, you know, create a rune stave out of it. But to me, that's an extension of, again, just working cooperatively with the runes. I think it's, at the very least, I think it's a misunderstanding, an incomplete understanding for people who want to arbitrarily grab different runes and throw them together because they want to create something. I think that's an incomplete understanding of the runes and what they are. They're far more powerful than that. Anyway, just throwing out some ideas. Obviously, you know, if I was big on rune magic, I would have written a book on rune magic. I didn't. I've written 3 books on runes, which are Rune Shamanism, Rune Divination, and Advanced Rune Shamanism. So those are the things I really have more expertise in than actual rune magic. Okay, so let's move on, see if there are any other questions out there. Questions? Okay, so DS15 Full says the reason he asked is because he's currently connecting with the runes and they sometimes reveal to him rune stave formulas. Well, so yeah, so that's along the lines of, you know, what I was saying. You're working with the runes, and the runes themselves, the runes have consciousness. The runes themselves are revealing to you different rune stave formulas. So that's the best way to do it. I mean, if that's how the runes want to work with you, then that's obviously an ability that you have. Like I said, I'm not even so sure I have that ability to create rune staves. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. It just doesn't really interest me as much as channeling the runes and communicating with them. So if the runes themselves are revealing themselves to you in that way, then that's pretty clear indication that that's how they want to work, and that's how I would want a rune stave formula to be created, is exactly the way you've said, an intuitive connection. Because what that's saying is that the runes are telling you, here's how we want to work with you, here's how we want to empower you or resolve this situation. And here's the different rune combinations for you. So, you know, also the thing about rune stave is that, you know, on a higher level, it really is a science, and it shouldn't be played around with unless you know what you're doing. You know, that's pretty clear. There was a, you know, read something somewhere, historically speaking, about there was a sick person, and you know, this is way back, you know, 1,000 years ago or whatever, and somebody who was a rune apprentice carved a rune stave onto the person's bed, and the person got sicker. And then an actual master, you know, Rune Vitki, came in and saw it and realized there was a mistake, and, you know, added a couple of little lines here and there to fix it, and then the person got better. So that's, you know, that just says that to be a rune wizard, you really have to know what you're doing when you're working with other people. Having said that, you know, we have no idea the veracity of that story. It could have just been something somebody used to promote themselves. So you never really know. Anyway, so I don't see any more questions here. Question just came up. So would it be correct in saying everything is magical in our reality depending on our intentions? Well, I would say everything is magical in your reality regardless of your intentions. You know, we like to think of magic when we're thinking that we're having some influence based on our intentions. But everything is magical. See, this is the illusion. Everything is magical. And so, again, that's one of the misconceptions, that, you know, we can just impose our will onto the universe. And as I've said, you know, the fastest and most important way and the most powerful way to achieve magic is when you are simply aligning to your deepest soul desire. You know, a lot of magicians spend a lot of time trying to impose things onto the universe because they, number one, have this assumption that the universe is either neutral or is hostile to them. And so they need to impose their will onto the universe. But if the intention that you have is not in alignment with your deepest soul desire, then all you're doing is just grinding your own gears. You're either wasting your time, or you're at best you're going to manifest something for you that's going to take you down a false path, that you're going to go, this isn't what I wanted. You know, and listen, I'm like everybody else, and this is usually what happens in the beginning. People want to impose their will through magic, and then they realize that that's really a waste of time, that there's a lot more power in just surrendering to your true essence, and then using those energies to let them flow through you to become that, as opposed to trying to, you know, falsely impose your own ego, basically, onto the universe. All right, so... Well, so Lamprey is asking, he's 15 and a Libra, please help. So Lamprey, just let me just say that I need far, far more information than just your sign. Again, I don't know if Libra is your Western sign, because the Western sign and the Vedic are totally different. We don't go by the sun sign. So let me just clear up something here. Western astrology, the kind of astrology that you find when you open up the paper, that is going to tell you based on your sun sign. Your sun stays when you're born. The sun stays in a sign for 30 days. So it really doesn't tell you anything about your specific... This is one of the things I think Western astrology is way off on. Your sun sign doesn't tell you what your personality is. It's telling you about things having to do with your soul, which is, of course, part of your ego, but it's not your personality. What we want is your ascendant. And also, Western astrology goes off of the tropical zodiac, so it takes a completely different view. You know, what you're looking at on your chart is not what's directly above you. So Vedic goes with the sidereal, which is the stars that are directly above you. So again, you might not even be a Libra. But even if you were a Libra, that's not nearly enough information. I would need all of your information, and I don't do that here on these Q&As. If you want a reading from me, please go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. I'd be happy to, you know, and the reason for that is I want to be of help to you, and I want to be able to tell you information that you need. If I throw out just some kind of general information, it's probably not going to be helpful to you. Okay, so anyway, thank you for that question. What are my thoughts on the sign of Ophiuchus? I know nothing about that, so I have no thoughts. C. Betranu, what is gone end? What, I think you're asking what is going to end on the 23rd this month. Well, there's some kind of alignment that, again, this is coming from Western astrology, and it's coming from these born-again Christians are trying to talk about the end of the world, and they're talking about the rapture, which is where Jesus comes down and scoops up all of the good Christians, and the devil takes over the world. So I don't see that as being the case anyway. I have to look at it again, but there's nothing. You know, the only thing that I would say is that it's going to be a continuation of what happened with the eclipse. So I do think that what is going to happen with this continuing energy of the eclipse is that, you know, we just had this huge, again, it went over the United States, remember. So we just had this huge hurricane that was the worst, if I'm hearing the news right, this is the worst hurricane flooding disaster in the history of the United States. And we've got all this pressure on Donald Trump, who is floundering right now in terms of, you know, he's lost all of his aides. He's had to fire all of his aides because there's been some controversy or some potentially legal problems that they've been doing, or they have publicly gone against the president, and he doesn't like that, so he ends up firing people. He is having huge problems in the media. Regardless of whether you think it's fake news or not, his reputation is really at stake. This is a direct result of the eclipse in Leo going over the United States. And because Donald Trump's ascendant, people get on my case and say Trump is a Gemini. No, his sun is in Gemini, and that's what Western astrology goes off of, which is the sun sign. But his true personality is his ascendant, which is Leo. So that's why it was such a big deal for him. And Leo, again, is the seat of government, the seat of the king, especially. So this is why we're seeing all these problems. Donald Trump is having all of these issues, but we're going to see more of his. That what's going to happen is, what's coming up this month and next month is that he's going to be criticized far more sharply, and we might even see the fall of him. We might see him either resign, or at the very least he will lose almost all of his influence if he hasn't already. And then we're going to see a judgment. So if you believe that he's going to be exonerated, that's when we're going to see the judgment. But we're also going to see things that are hidden, especially all over the world, with things that have to do with hidden agendas with the elites, those in power. So we're going to find out. All right, so moving on, let's see if there are any more questions. Can I email you more information about my current practices? I've had a okay, so DS15 full. So if you're asking me, can you email me and create an email dialogue with me where I will give you advice, I do that professionally. So no, if I said yes to you, then I would be constantly dealing with people emailing me questions all the time. I would have no time. So if you want to have a, and I would recommend getting a reading from me. Go to astrology.thunderwizard.com and purchase an astrological reading from me. If you just want then you can put it in the notes. I don't need a reading, I just need advice. But I can't afford to just get into an email conversation with you. And again, people go, no, just give me a couple minutes, answer this one question. And the truth is that there's far more information that I need to be able to help you, and that takes time. So if you want my help, I'm happy to help you. But yeah, go and purchase a reading. I'd be happy to help you. Yeah, again, Romney on Germany, same thing. It's not enough. First off, I can't tell you anything about Western astrology, so don't give me Western astrology information. And I'd need far more information to give you a reading. So if you want a reading, I'm happy to give you. And by the way, for people who are not in this country, sometimes they can't, they don't have the ability to get a direct Skype or phone time with me because of my hours. So what I do in that case, if somebody's in another country and we can't really line up to be able to talk directly, then what I do is I will take a reading and I will go ahead and record it onto YouTube and give you a link. And I'll talk for usually about an hour about your chart. So that's just to let you know, that's one of the things I can do. Okay. All right, so again, Romney on Germany, again, I need a question. That's a lot of information. Oh, you may not even be talking to me. Impro Live just asked me, what do I know about September 23rd, 2017? I already just talked about that, so you must have just logged on. So go back, and after this is recorded, go back and watch it from the beginning, and you'll hear me talk about it. All right, so again, looking for questions. I'm not seeing any, so let's continue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little bit of business, and then I'm going to get into the planets in particular, and we'll start talking about what the different planets can do under different scenarios. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So let's see here. If I don't think any questions came up here. Yeah, nope, nothing for me. I see people talking to each other. Wait, Ramnian Germany says, could I be so powerful that catastrophes happened when I was mad at that time? You know, that's actually a pretty good question, even though I'm chuckling about it. You know, we do create our own reality. So it would be wrong of me to say no, that that's not possible. But the other way to look at it is it's so much that you have the ability to create catastrophes, or is it that those catastrophes have the ability to impact your emotions? Are you simply responding to the energies that are happening in your environment? So that's important. You know, spiritual practice, you know, like the Qigong practice especially that I do, mantra practice, all of the stuff that I teach, that's designed to give you power to be self-empowered within yourself so that you are not easily influenced by outside things. Most people go through their life as victims and see themselves as being manipulated by outside forces. So my first response is, I don't think that you were creating those catastrophes. I think that you were allowing yourself to be influenced by them. And more importantly, I think it's also, you know, what happens is that, you know, for instance, if somebody is born during a catastrophe, it doesn't mean that they created it. It means that that catastrophe is reflecting an existing internal conflict within their spirit when they're born. So they're attracted to those catastrophes because that is what mirrors what their conflict is. And this is what's really going on. When you see things in your external world, it's going to reflect your internal conflict. So again, you know, with me, I just went through this eclipse, and I'm one of the biggest people that talks about, you know, listen, we control our destinies. But I was, you know, what happened is that this eclipse brought out internal conflicts that already existed. So the idea is that if somebody has zero conflicts, first off, they're not going to be a human being. They will have moved on and become an elf. But if somebody has zero internal conflicts, then they won't have any reaction to anything that happens around them. But when we have planetary alignments and things like eclipses and that kind of stuff, these are things that are already there inside of you that then get stimulated and released. So yeah, you saw me chuckle at that. I don't think that you're so powerful that you can do that. I think what's happening is that the opposite. You are being influenced by outside events, and then what we do is, you know, our narcissism is we think it's all about us. So anyway, let me see. But anything is possible. You know, it's possible you could be that powerful. I'm looking again for the questions. I'm not seeing anything. All right, so let's start talking about the planets in general. So you saw the little thing. I went through them, some basic things. Again, we're talking about spiritual powers, and you know, when it comes, let's talk about what spiritual powers are. Spiritual powers are not evidence of your spiritual enlightenment. Let me say that again. Spiritual powers are not a representation of your spiritual enlightenment. The opposite. Spiritual powers are representing unresolved karmic issues in your aura that need to get balanced. So healing is one of the best ways to describe this. I've talked about it before, but somebody who has the power to heal. Let's say thousands of people come to him or her and they can simply lay their hands on them and the person is healed. This does not mean they are spiritually enlightened. It means that they have a lot of karma to resolve. It means that in past lives they've either harmed or killed a lot of people. And so those people that they've harmed in previous lives come to them and seek to have that energy balanced. Okay? And one of the ways you know this is true is that a lot of spiritual healers and spiritual teachers are very wise, and they have a lot of, they're really important to people's spiritual progress, but they can really get caught up into abusing their power. They get full of themselves. They think that they're God incarnate. They have affairs with their students. They steal. They take all their money. Might be abusive in all kinds of ways. So obviously they're not fully enlightened, but they do have something. I mean, you can name pretty much any famous spiritual teacher. I don't have a problem exposing the big frauds, like Osho, Bhagwan Rajneesh. That was a total fraud. He was a total cult leader, and he's still really popular. It's because he had a lot of wisdom. And when he was on his game, he had a lot of wonderful things to say, but he was very destructive in so many ways. So that just lets you know, when we're talking about psychic abilities, healing abilities, energy abilities, all of those things, if you have those, it does not mean you are enlightened. It means that there are lessons within those things that need to be balanced out, and they're being stimulated in your aura either through a rise of Kundalini and or an increase in energy. So, having said that, I don't judge it. I myself have had periods where I had all kinds of crazy abilities, and I sought after them. So, one of the ways that we do it, which is what we're going to talk about, which is to work with the planets and to use the planets to stimulate your inherent abilities, whether they be psychic or spiritual or even mundane in terms of, how to become a good businessman or whatever, counselor, that kind of thing. We use the planetary energies to stimulate that. Another real fast-track way to deal with that is to work directly with life force energy. Life force energy that is at a certain frequency that will stimulate your inherent abilities. So that's one way. One way is to go and work with somebody like me and try and pinpoint exactly what's going on. The other way is to work directly with the life force energy itself and have that energy come into your aura, open up your meridians, and then whatever latent abilities that you have within you will be stimulated and empowered. The way to do that, I recommend, this is the fastest and most powerful way to do it, which is celestial qigong. So this is what I'm talking about in the ads, where you see, to stimulate or awaken the light body. The light body has to do with your aura. So the celestial qigong is a very high vibrational energy source that actually acts as a beacon. When you do the exercises, you're sending like a radio message out into the universe for the ancestral masters. And they hear it, it's like the bat signal. They see it and they come rushing to whoever's doing it, and then you'll have all kinds of experiences based on what it is that you need. So those are the two ways to do it, either, that I know of. Work with a Vedic astrologer or go directly to the source. So I can help you with both of those. Okay, so let's talk about, since we're on that, let's talk about the planets. And first let's talk about Jupiter. Jupiter, as I was putting the planets together on here, Jupiter popped up first and said, I need to be first. So what is it that Jupiter gives in a person's chart? So Jupiter is seen as the most spiritual of planets. It is the third most influential planet in anybody's chart. The first is the Sun, for obvious reasons. Without the Sun, there is no life. The Sun represents your soul, your ego. It does not represent your personality. This is where Western astrology is off. You know, I'm a Virgo in Western astrology, and I've never related to Virgo in terms of my my personality. I am a Leo. My ascendant is Leo. My moon is in Leo. I'm very, as you can tell, I'm very much a Leo. You know, Leo is the king. You know, and so, you know, my ascendant, my physical body, my personality is very much the king. I'm out there. I've got all the answers. I'm the one in charge. You know, that's my personality. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have Virgo influences. Of course I do, because Virgo is part of my sun sign. So on an internal level, there is a lot of Virgo within me, deep inside on the soul level. So the first most important planet is, actually the most important thing is the ascendant. Second most important thing is the moon. The moon is your mind. The moon is your emotions. And the mind is also, without a mind you can't function either. So you've got to have a soul, which is your spirit, and then you've got to have a mind. And as you know, the main function of the moon is to reflect the soul, to reflect the sun. So the sun and the moon, and the third most important planet in somebody's chart is going to be Jupiter, because Jupiter has by far the strongest influence. It's the largest planet next to the sun. It has the largest, by far, the largest electromagnetic field than any of the other planets. It's second only to the sun. So that's why we want to talk about Jupiter first. Jupiter represents our spirituality. Jupiter is said to be the most benefic of the planets. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be functional malefic, which meaning in a certain context it can have a negative experience. I mean, it always helps you spiritually, but you may not be a pleasant experience. So I can certainly say that, you know, me and Jupiter have sort of that kind of relationship, and I'll get into that. Jupiter is the planet of spirituality. It's the planet of the teacher. So there are two planetary teachers. One is Jupiter and the other is Venus. Venus is supposedly the teacher of the Vanir, the teacher of the terrestrial deities, the gods of physical reality, of mundane magic, of fertility, art, beauty, sensuality, food, money, those kinds of things. So that Venus is the teacher of those aspects, and Jupiter is the teacher of the higher aspect. Jupiter also has a very strong connection with the North Star, and the North Star is the only, like when you look up in the sky and you take a time, whatever you call that, a time-lapse photo where you keep the shutter open for hours, you'll see this big circle of stars. In fact, I think I have it here. And the one star that's not moving is the North Star. No, I think I got rid of it. Yeah, I got rid of it. So Jupiter has a strong connection to the North Star, meaning that, first of all, represents the crown chakra. The North Star represents our highest awareness. And so Jupiter is what brings us up to that, our highest awareness. So Jupiter wants to be first. Jupiter says, when you're talking about spiritual powers, you have to talk about me first, because we have to be talking about your spiritual connection to your higher wisdom, your higher awareness. Jupiter represents also expansion in terms of giving. Jupiter is very generous. Jupiter is non-judgmental. Jupiter does not judge people, but Jupiter is the priest. So Jupiter is the one that goes through all of the rituals which are designed to bless and empower the people. So where Jupiter is in your chart will tell you what kind of powers you have. Now, there are all kinds of things that will indicate it, but there are three houses in particular that are very important. Your 4th house, your 8th house, and your 12th house. As it so happens, I have Jupiter retrograde in my 8th house in Pisces. So Jupiter also likes water signs. So, and Pisces in particular is where, you know, one of the signs, Jupiter likes Cancer a lot. the sign of the moon, but it also likes Pisces, its own sign. So what does that mean for me? That means that 8th house is the house of secret knowledge. It's the house of death and resurrection. It's the house of the deep unconscious. It's the house of tantric spirituality, not tantric sexual tantra, but tantra meaning ritual, occult ritual, all that kind of stuff. And what do I talk about? So much of the time I go on and on. I mean, I probably use the word unconscious more than any other word in my vocabulary, because that's where my spiritual awareness goes to. In fact, let me see something else here in my chart, because you can also take a look and see on what's called your D9 chart, which is the chart that tells you the fruits of your birth chart. And let's see where my moon is there. Yep, just as I thought, I have Moon and Ketu in the 8th house in Scorpio. So you couldn't have a stronger 8th house energy. So that is my 9th divisional, which means you see where energies are going as you get older. So that means that my mind and my shamanic ability are going to be centered in that 8th house. So as you can see, as I am now 54 years old, here I am now representing myself as the thunder shaman, right? And this is what I do. Earlier on, Leo is one of the signs for actors, and in my young adulthood, I was an actor. I was on stage, Leo on stage. Now, the D9 says, here's where your energies are going to go. And so what's happening now is my mind and my shamanic ability wants to go and sit there with Jupiter in the 8th house. The other house is the 12th house. The 12th house is the house of liberation from the body. So it's actual physical death. But planets in that house will tell you what energies are wanting to take you to spiritual liberation, meaning to death. So for me, Jupiter is in a great place because the 8th house is a really great house for not only astrologers, for psychics, for shamans, but it's a great house for teachers who want to teach or are led to teach transformational teachings, who are led to teach deep, spiritual, hidden, kinds of things. So if we had Mars in there, for example, let's say Mars in the 8th house in Scorpio, then we might be dealing with a black magician. At the very least, somebody who might have some real problems, because the 8th house is also sudden changes. And that's true with me. When I've worked with Jupiter, this is why I'm a little hesitant to work with Jupiter sometimes. I've worked with Jupiter, or when Jupiter goes retrograde, I have sudden changes which will affect me really deeply. Last time it ended up happening, I ended up getting an inguinal hernia. That's, all kinds of other reasons. So that's Jupiter. When we're really talking about the highest form of spiritual powers, real spiritual sight, not just being able to be psychic, like seeing ghosts or telling mundane future things like you're going to find your keys tomorrow or something like that. But when you really want to look deep into spiritual concepts, because again, Jupiter is the planet that talks about deep spirituality that is difficult or impossible to put into words. So this is a very good placement for me, because that's exactly what I am. Listen, I didn't know that. I didn't look at my chart and say, I'm going to be the thunder shaman. I already was going in that direction. I became the thunder shaman, publicly. And then I went, oh, look at that. Jupiter in my 8th house with Moon and Ketu going towards my 8th house in my D9 chart. All right, so that's Jupiter. We can move on, take a look at the other planets really quickly. We've got the Sun, Okay, Rahu is hiding from me. Just like Rahu does. Rahu's very sneaky. All right, so that's Jupiter. So that's one of the first things you want to look for in somebody's chart. You want to look and see where is Jupiter placed, you know, that'll tell you a lot in terms of their spiritual, their deep spiritual side. All right, so DS15 Full says, is celestial qigong Wu Qigong? Well, first off, I don't know what Wu Qigong is. If you're referring to a practice called Wu Qigong, there are numerous types of Wu Qigong. But if you're talking about the really popular Wu Qigong practice, that there's a couple of DVDs out there that looks a lot like Tai Chi, this is not Wu Qigong. I have practiced Wu Qigong before. It's a very wonderful healing practice. But no, Celestial Qigong is not Wu Qigong. Celestial Qigong is a Qigong practice that I, what's the word I want to use? I intuited, I created, that came from the Taoist spirit fighting arts, which is a secret shamanic energy practice and also a martial art that's used for fighting negative entities, literally fighting them with your bare hands. It gives you a tremendous amounts of power. So Celestial Qigong was, what I did is I took a lot of those postures and things that I had intuited as a result of training in that and mastering some of those things, and I went ahead and put it into a practice that could be easily taught. One of the benefits of Celestial Qigong that I have found, not just for me, this is what overwhelmingly people are telling me that do it, is that it connects them directly to their spiritual guides. So like I said, when you do Celestial Qigong, it's like sending up the bat signal, and you're sending out a message to the ascended masters to come and energetically teach you. And so if you want to be able to have your spiritual powers ignited, that is probably the fastest way that I know of to do it. So to do that, go to qigong.thunderwizard.com. Qigong is spelled QIGONG.thunderwizard.com. I have other videos on that page that'll tell you exactly where this came from and what it does. Okay. All right, so moving on, I don't see any questions. So let's move on to the next planet. So the next planet I have here is the Sun. So the Sun is not technically going to give you spiritual abilities, because the Sun, even though it's the power of the soul, it's going to be strongly connected to your conscious mind. So your conscious mind is how you interface with 3D, real-life, waking reality. And so when we're talking about spiritual abilities that go beyond that, then we're looking at some of the other planets. But when we're talking about the Sun is what gives you your authority. So from the Sun, depending on its placement, we're going to find out things about your father. We're going to find out things about your relationship to government and authority in general. We're going to find out what your abilities are in terms of being a leader, in terms of business, that kind of thing. So Sun is the king. So there's not a whole lot of spiritual powers to be found with the Sun. But again, everything is very specific, you know, depending on somebody's chart. So let's see, after Sun, we have one of my very favorite planets, the Moon. Okay, so the Moon is really, really important. The Moon is easily one of the most, if not the most important planet when it comes to spiritual abilities, because the Moon is your mind. Let's be clear, your mind is not your intellect. Most Westerners, nowadays, most people in the world, confuse their intellect with their mind. In fact, there are some people that don't have any connection to their mind whatsoever, being the moon. So the moon is your mind, meaning the ability to reflect the spirit. That's why meditation is very connected to the moon. It has a strong connection. It is the emotions, because your emotions will guide your thinking. You know, again, a lot of times when I work with people, I will, ask them a question, and they'll tell me something, and then I'll say, okay, but how does that make you feel? And then sometimes you hear people stop and they go, they don't know how they're feeling. That's somebody who has a very strong intellect, or whose intellect is actually clouding their ability to see their emotions. Now here's what's important. Your emotions will drive all of your actions, either consciously or unconsciously. So even though people especially people who say, I never do anything out of my emotions, I always reason things through, you can be guaranteed that those people are actually taking all of their actions from their emotional reality, but they are disconnected from their emotions. And so what happens is they use their intellect to divert themselves. They're always, you run into these people a lot who want to argue, right? And they want to argue and argue and argue. And no matter, even if you show them the truth, or if you give them really a good response which destroys their argument, they always have some other circuitous little thing where they can, like a little kid, well, yeah, but this and that, we have to know what that means, blah, 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 blah. That's somebody who's using their intellect in order to hide from their emotions. So when it comes to spiritual abilities and psychic abilities, our emotions are really important, and the moon is really important. So again, if we see the moon in the first house, which is the physical body, that means that the person has strong intuitive abilities, and this is somebody who can feel emotions with their body. Like if you walk into the room and you've got a lot of feelings, they'll be able to feel it in their physical body. Like for me, I have moon in my first house. And so actually moon in my first house is debilitated because I was born on a new moon. So that means I'm really susceptible to other people's energies. That's why I'm such a homebody. And I go to a restaurant, if my girlfriend and I go out to a restaurant, even if it's a normal restaurant, for me, it's just way too much noise. Even if it's just normal noise, because most people, and this bugs the crap out of me, but people, for whatever reason, especially once they have like a sip of wine or something, they need to have the music super loud, and then you hear like the more people, as people have more and more glasses of wine, the volume level starts to raise. It makes me so uncomfortable. Well, that's because I have a debilitated moon in my first house, which means I can really feel other people's emotions. If you walk into the room and there's an unconscious issue, I know it immediately. So by the way, students of mine, if you work with me, don't take it personally, because I have a limited amount of time if I have a session with you. If I go right into the session and I say, listen, I don't want to waste your time, here's what's going on with you, it's because I'm able to intuit what the real unconscious emotional issue is. Now, my failing is sometimes I don't explain it in a way that helps you see it. I just blurt out, here's what's going on. And so lots of times people go, what? Where is he coming from? And then by the end of the conversation, they'll know what I'm talking about. And of course, sometimes I'm wrong, and I am just, but most of the time, I'm either right or I'm in the general vicinity, because that's what my moon does. So what happens if you have your moon in your fourth house? Well, the same thing. The fourth house is your home, so this is actually a really good place for the moon, as long as it doesn't have any other, negative planetary, combinations or conjunctions or influences. This is going to be somebody who's very intuitive, especially when it comes to the family and the people in your home. So this is a great place, like if somebody wanted to be a healer or a counselor, and let's say they had moon in Cancer in the fourth house, that would mean you would want to go to that person's house and get healing from that person or counseling from that person. It means that the power of the maternal, the power of the healer would be there in their home, and you would really need to go, and their home would be like this temple to the moon, temple to the goddess. It'd be a wonderful place. If you have it in the 8th house, then it can be a very challenging, depending on what sign it's in and what other planets are there. Like for me, going into my D9 chart, I have Moon and Ketu in Scorpio. So that's not my birth chart, by the way. That's my D9 chart. So that's where my mind wants to go. And so that means I have a shamanic, emotional, intuitive, empathic, abilities that are, as I get older, get stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you have in your birth chart, if you have Moon and Ketu there, that's a definite sign you're a shaman. In fact, you might have difficulty staying in this realm. You might be so connected because of Ketu that your mind is constantly seeing spirits, ghosts. You're traveling to other dimensions. This is one of the powers that what happens in the Moon in the 8th. When Moon gets into the 12th house, then you've got a dreamer. You got somebody who can literally leave this plane through their mind and just exit their body, and they're thinking about leaving their body through their mind, through their meditations. So this is one of the powers and the placements of the Moon. Definitely one of the most, if not the most important planet when it comes to talking about spiritual and psychic abilities. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions here. So I'll continue on. I will continue on talking about the next planet. You wouldn't think is going to give you spiritual abilities, but being that I have a very strong connection with this planet, I have a different experience. So Mars is the warrior. Mars is the warrior. And so, Mars is your energy, it's your determination, it's your discipline, it's, depending on how it's placed, it's your martial ability, your ability to defend yourself, but it also can make you very intellectual. It can make your thoughts, you can be really dominant in your communication. I have Mars in my 3rd house. 3rd house is communication, so those of you who know me, I can be very dominant in my communication, especially when I have something I want to say. You hear me do that. That's Mars comes through with, he just has to get that information out there. Very dominant in his communication. But if you have Mars in certain scenarios, then you can have somebody who's a black magician. Somebody who has the ability to do magic. You remember I talked about magic earlier in terms of being able to impose your will onto your environment. This is how Mars does things. So when Mars decides he wants to become spiritual, that's what he does, because Mars is a conqueror. Mars is the fighter. He goes out and wins the battle. So if he's not out there physically battling and dominating and conquering, if he is wanting to express himself through spiritual planes, then that is how he does it. He will want to impose his will through spirituality, through spiritual powers. And so he'll use his powers to dominate and create. And so this is where black magic comes from, because black magic is, you're wanting to, make somebody fall in love with you, or you're wanting to influence them, which, of course is very short-lived, and, there's a lot of negative things there, negative potentials there. But that's one of the things that Mars will do. So as it turns out, because I have Mars in my 3rd house in Libra, that means Libra is taking Mars in me and wanting to focus him on a spiritual plane. But 3rd house is also hands. So you can see like a boxer, for instance. Somebody who can strike with their hands, you might see that Mars in the 3rd house, especially if it has a connection to Saturn. So as it turns out, Mars and Saturn in my chart are staring at each other. So that means when you got Mars and Saturn working together, this can make a really unbeatable martial artist. But because I've got it in my 3rd house there, Mars, even though 3rd house is hands, and that turns out what I did. The martial art I did was, predominantly striking. And I do. I have friends. In fact, I have a friend of mine who's, 5th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, who trained in all these different arts, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And he goes all over the world teaching people MMA. And, he's really, really revered. And he says, seeing the stuff that I do, he doesn't know how to do it, for one thing. I've tried to show him, and he can't do it. He can't figure it out. But he said, the last thing I would want is to be locked in a closet with you, or in a small space with you, because he knows that in that close quarters combat, my hands he can't defend himself. So when you got all this going on, then you've got Venus in Libra trying to then make me take my martial abilities and turn them into a more spiritual thing, which is why I trained in spirit fighting. And what does spirit fighting do? It is used to cleanse the area of negativity. It's used when on another person. It's very devastating, but it also will actually the energy hits them on a spiritual level. In fact, the first time that I got hit with the spirit fighting energy, I felt my soul jump out of my body. That's why I put that picture in there, where it has martial abilities. It comes from that movie that just came out, Doctor Strange, where she shoves him, and what she does is she pushes his spirit out of his body. I've had that experience, and I've done that to people before. So that's what, Mars with me, I have a combination where Mars really wants to focus on my spirituality. So this is why I'm constantly doing things like rituals and meditations and doing sadhanas, or vows for 40 days, because Mars is also the warrior, the disciplined warrior. He needs discipline. So if you had Mars in the first house, by the way, I can look it up while I'm speaking. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was not. He was a sort of a spiritual guy, but what we know Bruce Lee for is his spiritual powers. Oh, actually, I was completely wrong about that. Oh, I see. Here's what it is. So Bruce Lee has his ascendant, which is in Vedic his actual sign. He has Sun in the first house in Scorpio. So that's going to make him extremely egotistical, and it's going to make him an egotistical warrior. And he's got Mars in there, but Mars is in his 12th house, which means that Mars is also going to want to kill him. So as we know, he died at a very young age, at the height of his popularity as a martial artist. Anyway, I was going to say that Mars in the first house can definitely make you a warrior, because it's your physical body. So your physical, Mars is going to want to express itself in the physical body. If it's not going to want to express itself as martial arts, like my girlfriend has Mars in her first house, but she also has Moon in there as well. So she actually hates violence, but she has to move all the time. She's constantly exercising, climbing stairs and lifting weights and, taking long hikes, and she needs that because Mars in her physical body has to do that. So, but Mars under the right circumstance can make somebody, an incredibly powerful magician. We just have to see, is it in the 8th house? That would be like the 8th house with Moon or with Jupiter that could make somebody a very powerful magician. Okay, so let's see what any questions there are here. Let's see. Master Sonho says, Mike, what do you think about the idea that some of us are source players in this reality and everybody else is artificial intelligence? I think it's pure nonsense. That's coming from Quartz Crystal, right? I don't know if she made it up or who else, but that is a real sure way to try and create a cult. Because look, when you're operating from fear, and if you're operating from fear, you see yourself as a victim. I'm not saying you personally see yourself this way. I'm just talking in general. Somebody sees themselves as a victim, then when somebody interacts with you in a way you don't like, that threatens you, then the way that you defend yourself is you make them a non-entity. So this is what serial killers do, by the way. That's how they justify killing people. This is what warriors have to do. You know, when people go to war, they have to, you know, only see the worst things about them. You know, they're my enemy. You know, they're this, they're that. You know, whatever it is. It might be true that they are those things, but they're also people. So to see somebody as a bot, as just an artificial intelligence, that is really coming from a really disempowering place. So no, I don't think that at all. I think quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Yeah, so go and watch my videos on the Matrix and all of that, because I talk about what the Matrix really is. Anyway, okay, moving on. Somebody emailed details on my astrology readings. Can you give me? Okay, so this must be. Yeah, I've been thinking about that question. In fact, I was going to respond to you with that, which is, you're kind of asking me for a second reading, and I know it doesn't seem that way to you. What I got was that you wanted me to give you the directions for each of the planets. I'm assuming you want that so that you can do rituals, you know which direction to face, so you can work with each of those planets. But what you really want is, you don't just want that, you also need to know what sign it's in. So for that, that's going to tell you what the ritual is. So again, specifically when I work with Mars, I face southeast because my Mars is in Libra, and because Libra is Venus, I then put a libation in front of me. So to get the most out of that, you got to have all of those things. So if you want all that information, I'm happy to give it to you. Go ahead and get a second reading from me, and then I can lay out for each planet which direction, which element I can take, you know, and also which deities and which mantras and all of that. We can look at all of that for you. So that's why I hesitated, because it's like, you know what, that's not enough information. I really want to make sure that when I give information, I give information that you can really use. You know, and I know a lot of people want to email me and they want me to ask them, you know, quick questions, but you know, make the use of what you have, number one, because if you have worked with me, I've given you a lot of very specific information. But if you want more information, I'm happy to go there. My desire is I want to do it right. I'm one of those people, if I can't do it right, I don't want to do it at all. So my apologies that I didn't get back to you. I really was thinking about it, and I was thinking about how did I want to respond. So there you go. Now you just got my email. All right, so let's see here. Romney on Germany, there's no question mark, but I think your question is which is connected to pride. Which planet is connected to pride? That is going to be Sun and Rahu, specifically. And I'll get into that. Okay. Alan says, what should we ask for in a reading, or what kind of reading, to learn what our spiritual powers might tend to be? Well, thing to do is, if you already had a reading from me, then you can go on astrology.thunderwizard.com and put in the notes, hi Michael, I'm wanting another reading to focus on my spiritual abilities. Then I'll know what to look for, and I'll be able to put something together, and then, you know, either on video or over the phone or on Skype, I can tell you exactly what that is. And if if I've already given you like I said, you know, it's a great second reading, because usually I'll only give somebody one ritual which will be connected to one of their planets. But I always say, listen, if you want me to look at rituals for some of these other planets, then please feel free to get another reading from me, because I already have your information, so it makes it a lot easier. That, by the way, is astrology.thunderwizard.com to go do that. All right, so I answered that question, I believe. All right, so I'm going to go do a little bit of business, and then, again, when I say I'm doing business, I'm going to put ads for myself. Some people think I'm, doing something else. I'm going to do a little bit of business here, which is I'm going to show you what services I offer and where you can find them, and then I will talk about our next planet, which is a big one, and I'll answer any questions if there are any. Excuse me. All right, so now I always do that. I need my glasses to see. What is that? I'm nearsighted, which means I can see things right in front of me, but I can't see things as far away as well. All right, so I need to look at the next planet here, which is a big one, literally. Saturn. So Saturn is pretty much the opposite of Jupiter. Actually, that's not entirely true. The exact opposite of Jupiter is Rahu. But, and you know, I hesitate when I say it because in my chart, Saturn and Jupiter are actually working together, which again is, can make things challenging for me. But at the same time, Jupiter is offsetting some of the problems that Saturn might give me. So what is Saturn? Saturn is karma. Saturn is literally limitation. It's the constrictor. Listen, there's no coincidence that Saturn has a ring around it, because Saturn is representative of, if we want to talk about the reptilians, Saturn is representative of the reptilian energies of constriction. In the Vedic tradition and in the Norse tradition, you have the god Jupiter, which is the thunder god. Jupiter meaning one of the gods that represents Jupiter. Jupiter is expansion. Saturn is constriction. In the thunder wheel, let's see, do I have all the planets in there? Do I have the planets in here? Well, in any case, it'll be in the west you have Jupiter, in the east you have Saturn, or the other way around. In the east you have Jupiter, in the west you have Saturn. Jupiter is the northeast, but when the thunder god goes into the east, then he's functioning as the east. So in the east you have the expansion of life force energy, and in the west you have the contraction of literally of death. And so in all of the myths, we have the thunder god goes to fight against the dragon, goes against to fight against the serpent. In the Norse tradition, he fights against the world serpent. The world serpent encircles the earth. He's constricting human life. It's what gives us, on the one hand, we need limitation, because we wouldn't be able to function, but at the same time, we bump up against our limitations. And so Jupiter is expansive, so Jupiter expands against that, fights against that. So Saturn is this. Saturn constricts. So on the negative side, Saturn is karma, meaning the negative, the debt, as we say in the Norse tradition, the skuld, the future, the debt. Your destiny, meaning that which you can't escape as a result of your actions and your thoughts. Then what happens is you have Saturn comes in and says, here, you got to pay the price. You know, I talk about this. I'll give you an example. A lot of people are coming to me and wanting to talk to me about using power plants for their spiritual awareness and their spiritual enhancement, and to awaken their spiritual gifts. And so definitely power plants, you know, meaning like hallucinogens, can have that effect. But here's the difference. When you use an outside source, even if it's natural, I'm not saying it's not natural or any of that stuff, and people will say the same thing about DMT. Well, DMT is naturally released by the pineal gland, so let's just take a bunch of DMT. Well, what ends up happening is that's sort of taking things, it's like using a credit card to buy a car. Yeah, if you've got enough credit on that card, you can go out and buy that car, but eventually you're going to have to pay that back with interest. And in fact, you might end up getting so deep in debt that you have to go and declare bankruptcy. This is what happens when you use external forces that constrict you. So when you use a lot of power plants to achieve spiritual enlightenment, the end result is that, yeah, you have an immediate experience, but it ends up squishing the glands so hard that they get depleted, and then you crash, and then you're actually worse off than you were before. So Jupiter is the other way around. Jupiter is the one that freely gives. So if you want to have that experience with life force energy, Jupiter is life force energy, again, you can have that same experience naturally with celestial Qigong. So again, I'm just using that as an example, and while I'm on it, I'm going to promote it. So, okay, so when we're dealing with Saturn now on the positive side, so what are some of the spiritual gifts that Saturn gives to you? One of the spiritual gifts that Saturn gives to you is the ability of healing, the ability of counseling. If it's placed right, you can actually be a judge. And the ideal function of the judge is not to punish you. The judge is like, listen, you've got to balance this out for your own benefit. So a good judge isn't just looking at how, you know, you're guilty of this, so we're going to put you into jail for X amount of years. A judge is going, listen, how can we rehabilitate that person and solve their problem? And so that's why, you know, lots of times in prison, if somebody really puts, as far as I know anyway, I've never been there, if somebody wants to, they can earn a degree in prison. You know, if somebody wants to. So that's Saturn is saying, hey, I'm going to isolate you and put you into this challenging place, but if you want, I'll teach you how to get out of it. So this is why Saturn represents counselors and can represent nurses and doctors and healers. In my chart, what Saturn is saying is saying that Saturn, besides whatever else Saturn is doing for me on a personal level, in terms of my job here, Saturn specifically is saying, I want to help you help other people get out of their karmic issues. So again, you can see that focus in my teaching. I'm talking so much about how to interface with your world so you're not a victim anymore. Because of being a victim means you're on the negative side of Saturn, where Saturn is looming over you and telling you, you know, you can't move here, you can't move here, you can't do this, you can't do that. Here, I'm going to force you with poverty and with illness and with other challenges to deal with it. And if you're looking at it from an immature perspective, which we all do in the beginning, then you're going to see Saturn as being the punisher. This is why people invariably, every single person I've worked with who is into conspiracy theories, or especially is into reptilian theories, like, you know, again, Saturn moon matrix, there are evil reptilian beings on Saturn who are you know, keeping you constricted and forcing you to reincarnate. That's because they're on the negative side of Saturn. So that's literally their experience. Saturn is coming to them and saying, listen, we are going to get you out of this childish wherever you are and whatever you've done that hasn't served you. Saturn is coming to you. And so at the first, that's all you see is these reptilian creatures and these snakes coming after you, trying to constrict you. But on the other side of that, people who have gone through difficulties, who have seen suffering either in this life or in previous lives, those are the ones who can sit there with you. You know, like one of the things that people have said to me before, you know, is that, you know, like when I'm working with clients, obviously if there's an issue that's coming up from their unconscious, I'm really quick to point it out. But when I see somebody who is consciously in that place of challenge, I will just simply nod my head and just go, yep, I know exactly what that's like. It's very painful. Because there's nothing to say. You know, if somebody's working through it, like, you know, I remember once a friend of mine, her brother died. And she would come to me because everybody else would try and cheer her up. And, you know, well, he's in a better place and, you know, all that. And she's like, God, I don't want to listen to them. And she would come and just sit next to me and I would just hold her hand. I wouldn't say anything. That's Saturn. Saturn says, hey, I know, man, I've been there. I can be there with you in your suffering without feeling like I need to, get you out of that. If you're actually consciously facing it, then Saturn says, I'm here and I'm holding your hand. So that's why somebody can be a great death counselor, a nurse, those kinds of things. And on the outside, you get healing. When somebody has the ability to, just with their presence, bring a healing in your morning, that's a spiritual gift of Saturn. So Saturn, gets a bad rap, but Saturn is like the judge. Is like, I don't, you're not going to like it, but I'm here to help you. And so you got to spend 6 months doing whatever it is you got to do, or I'm sentencing you to a year of whatever it is. So that's some of the aspects of Saturn. Okay, sorry about that. I was looking at questions. I should know better. I got a little involved. Okay, Dagger says, okay, thank you. Do you have any suggestions on books, websites I can... Yeah, I was going to say that too. All you have to do, it's so easy. All you have to do is go on to Google and type in free Vedic astrology birth calculator. And then, yeah, you can just go on and do that. And there are multiple sites that will give you a printout of your chart. And you have to learn how to read it. So if you want to do that, usually you go counterclockwise. Counterclockwise, 1, 2, 3. Or for you this way, 1, 2, 3. And then you'll find out what house the planet is in. You'll find out what sign it is in. Now then you're going to have to do some research and get some books. So to answer your question, you would have to get a few different books. And you'd have to kind of do what I did, because it's going to be hard to find all that. So again, if you want all that info, fastest way to do it is to get a reading. Otherwise, you can spend years looking it up like I did. So my first suggestion would just first go on to that and get your chart so you can look at it and see what house it's in and what sign it's in and that sort of thing. All right. Let's see, one more question. Master Sonho says, what is your view of using animals as food and consuming them? Well, my view is that people should do what they need to do. There are people who really need to be vegan and vegetarian. I personally don't do that. My Taoist teachers didn't do that. They ate, chicken and fish. So what is my view? I don't have a view on. Do whatever you feel comfortable doing. I don't judge people one way or another. Obviously, I'd have to judge myself. And you can see in somebody's chart if they're a meat eater or not. Some people are more inclined to eat flesh than others. So I don't know if I answered your question on it. I don't have one way or another. Do whatever works for you. Do what's healthiest for you. Okay, again, looking for the questions. Yeah, Obsidia is answering for me, but that's not my answer. That's your answer. So no, you can't answer for me, Obsidia. But that's fine that's your answer, and that's your experience. See, here's the thing about experience. You can't argue with somebody's experience. It may not be your experience, but, this is why, when it comes to things, I try to, a lot of times I'll say, in my experience, or here's what I've seen. That's because I'm leaving open the possibility that I either don't have all the information, or I might be wrong, or it might be situationally different for everybody. In my experience, I need tons of protein or I'm not a happy guy. And I've actually known people who were vegan and vegetarians for decades and ended up becoming anemic and had to become pescatarian because they found, and I've heard this from others, that there are certain enzymes and things that you can only get in animal flesh. So for some people, if you want to eat grubs or worms or something like that, But again, yeah, that's so. But I can't argue with your experience, and I can't argue with you telling people they should do that because you can back it up with your experience. And so, for those who are drawn to that, they should go to somebody like you and say, "How do I do this?" Okay, so all right. Moving on, let's now move on to the next planet, which is very important planet, very misunderstood planet, a planet that is very, very influential in modern thought, but people don't understand it all that much. So let's talk about that planet. The planet Mercury. If there was one planet, actually there are two planets. There are two planets that Western society operates from the most. It would be Rahu and Mercury. For sure. Rahu is the intellect. Remember I said there's a difference between the mind and the intellect. The moon is the mind, and the mind is the reflection of the spirit. It's seeing things from an objective standpoint. The intellect cannot do that. The intellect means literally to pick apart from among. The intellect's job is to reduce things to black and white, to dualistic understandings. This is why I'm constantly hammering away at Christianity. Christianity, even though Jesus is technically a god of Jupiter, the intellect it's a religion of the intellect. You know, Buddhism is also very intellectual, but the intellect has to reduce things into black and white terms. Now, I've said this before. This is extremely important. You can't function in our society or without it. You have to know which side of the road to drive on. That's the intellect. The intellect says, "Oh, definitely It's interesting. There's only this little yellow line, separating you and other cars that are going, 55, 65 miles an hour. There's just a little line. You're going in the exact opposite direction. The intellect has decided that's a law. I mean, I'm on this side, they're on that side. Without it, you would freak out because there's this thing coming at you 65 miles an hour and you're going 65, whatever that turns out to be, the force of that, I don't know, I'm not a mathematician, but our lives are on the line all the time. But our intellect has said, no, there's a yellow line right there. I'm on the right side. They're on their right side, and so we're not going to touch. So the intellect makes arbitrary decisions sometimes about what things are, what reality is. And again, that's what religion does. Religion makes arbitrary rules and regulations about what things are. God created the world in 7 days. And, well, now where do you get that? Well, it says so in the Bible. That's somebody who's just totally committed to their intellect and their intellect has no connection to anything else, their mind or anything else. But we need that because now we have this new way to communicate, which we didn't have, and I'm using it right now. Mercury has a strong connection to this. I'm communicating to you directly, almost live, through the internet, through a camera on this thing on the internet. It's coming up on your device, whatever it is. So Mercury has a strong connection to communication. And now, when Mercury is operating in its good capacity, it will give discernment, which means on a spiritual level, you'll be able to figure out what is BS and what isn't. So this is why we've got a lot of, I'm using my intellect when I destroy Christianity. I pick it apart, and I find all the things that are wrong with it. So I'm using my intellect that way in terms of discernment. So when you've got the Mercury lined up in certain ways, so for instance, let's say if Mercury and the Moon are conjunct in the 8th house, for instance. Now it depends on which one has the higher or the lower degrees, but now we have somebody who can psychically intuit things and may even be a shaman. But now you've got Mercury coming in there, which says, and let me explain to you the mechanics of exactly why that is. Here are all the different parts of the brain that allow the mind to be able to see. So Mercury will be able to explain it in a practical way. Mercury is all about practicality. So I have strong Mercury, very strong Mercury actually, in my second house, which is the house of study and the house of writing. So that's why I've written books, and that's why I go on and on and on. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, it's so much information. But that's my intellect really just slicing things apart and picking it apart. But more importantly, it's because my intellect wants to be able to absorb it and digest it and make it practical. So Mercury, when Mercury is connected in a good way, Mercury says, let's get down to the nuts and bolts. What do I do with that? So that's why when I talk about rituals, a lot of Vedic astrologers or teachers, even if they're right, will give you a ritual. Worship this planet, do this mantra, face this direction, do that. They won't even know why, because they're just following, that's what the rules say. But I'll be able to tell you exactly why and how and what it's doing, because that's important to me. So that's what Mercury does. So where Mercury is in your chart and what it's affecting, if it's connected to these houses we already talked about, or if it's connected to some of these other spiritual planets, like for instance Moon or Jupiter, then you're going to see somebody who's spiritual. Well, it depends. If Mercury is super strong, then Mercury is actually blocking their ability. So again, lots of times if I've worked with people who have a strong intellect, I'm constantly trying to get your intellect out of the way. What are you feeling when I get you into your mind as opposed to your intellect? Because I can stay there in your intellect and we will get nowhere. But when you want the intellect to surrender to the Moon and to Jupiter, and of course a specific chart will tell us all kinds of things why that is. So that's Mercury. So Mercury is really important in terms of modern spirituality. All right, let's see here. Let's see. I don't see any more questions. All right, yeah. So I'm looking for the questions. All right, so moving on, let us move to the next planet, which has a very interesting effect on spirituality, and this is important to understand the difference between Venus and the Moon, because Venus and the Moon sometimes do similar things. But let's take a look at Venus here. So Venus, like I said, Venus and the Moon, sometimes they get confused. They're both connected. Modern times, they're both connected to the goddess. In ancient times, the Moon was not connected to the goddess. It was connected to the male aspect of the mind. Moon was male. But in modern times, we have connected to the female aspect of the Moon. By the way, all planets have both a masculine and a feminine emanation. They all do. So nowadays we are looking at the Moon in terms of the feminine aspect of the Moon. The Moon's internal aspect is male, the external is female. It's the opposite from the Sun. The Sun's external is male and internal is female. So that's the yin and yang there. So what about Venus? Venus is, from an astrological perspective, a very watery planet. I know it's actually, I don't know if it actually is a watery planet. I know it wouldn't support human life very well. It's a very inhospitable actual planet to physically be on. But it has a very watery, very ethereal effect. So the Moon, when you're dealing with the Moon can give you objective reflections of the spirit and objective. The emotions are water, like the sun, like the ocean is emotions and flowing with the the tides and all that. That's our emotions. Venus is more like a lake or a river. So it's again waters, but more of that nurturing sort of healing aspect. Venus, of course, is a very earthy planet in terms of our physical bodies. The Venus it gives us pleasure. It's sensuality, sexuality, fertility, magic in terms of, you know, having an effect with nature and doing nature, working with nature spirits. So shamanism in that way. But Venus is also dreams. When we're going into the subconscious mind and we're dreaming. So Venus in the 12th house, for example, shows somebody who has spiritual dreams. Somebody who likes to go to things like ashrams and temples, who likes to have spiritual retreats. Whereas like, say, Moon in the 4th house, that would be somebody who wants to make their home a temple. But if you've got Venus in the 12th house, we're talking about somebody who wants to go to some vacation where they can just dream themselves away into another existence. So this is how Venus can help. If you have Venus in some of these other houses, like the 8th house, then you can get somebody who, you know, I'd have to really, you know, before I speak any further, you know, I can feel it, but I can't put it into words. So that's Venus. Venus can have a very, again, as I said, there are two teachers in astrology. The first one is Jupiter. Jupiter is the spiritual teacher. This is the priest, the guy who's in the temple and he does the traditional, you know, blah blah blah, and he does all of the rituals and things like that to get the blessings of the gods and all of that. And so he teaches the deep knowledge that can't be put into words. Venus is a teacher as well, but Venus teaches on a physical level. Venus says, yeah, I like going into the temple, but let's go out into nature and let's dance naked in the moon, and here's a beautiful love spell. And so that's how Venus is a spiritual teacher. And but also Venus is, even though it's technically one of the terrestrial gods, which is associated with less spiritual things, even though that is, Venus is a very loving, very giving planet, and a very healing planet as well. So for me in my chart, you can look at the D30 chart. Venus is how I am physically healed. So I actually am healed through all of the things connected. My mind and my body actually gets healing when I do things and practices connected to Venus. So for me, that's why I love having a very affectionate girlfriend, because that makes me very happy. It heals me, literally heals me of my diseases. All right, so moving forward, let's see if there are any questions about anything there so far. Obsidia asks, Mike, can a person's chart also tell you whether a person is more prone to anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses? Yes. And then goes on to say, which may not really be. Yes, I talked about it in the very beginning when I said, there are sometimes people feel disconnected. Maybe they feel schizophrenic. Maybe they see things. They have visions. They hear voices. And you try and tell that to the average person, and they'll tell you that you're insane, you need medication. Well, no, there might be something in your chart. And we're going to get into that when we talk about Ketu, Rahu and Ketu. So, in fact, that's the next one that's on. So let's just go there now. Let's just go to Ketu. Okay, so to best understand how this planet works with spirituality, we have to talk about the story of Rahu and Ketu. I've told this story before. I will tell it again because it's important. We got to understand what these planets do. So, Rahu was a demon, which in the Norse tradition we would call him a Vanir, actually, one of the Vanir, one of the terrestrial deities. And in the beginning, the gods were stirring up with the snake. They were using the snake to stir up and get the nectar of immortality to rise to the surface, and then they were going to scoop that off, and then they were going to drink it. Now, the celestial gods and the terrestrial gods were all there. They were all there with the expectation that they were going to drink the nectar of immortality and become immortal. And so they used the snake to do that, and the snake's name is Rahu. And so he had been given permission by Brahma to actually drink the nectar of immortality, and he knew ahead of time that the celestial gods were going to betray the terrestrial gods. And so what they did is the celestial gods came up with the plan to drink all of the nectar of immortality and not give any to the terrestrial gods. And the way they did that is they asked Vishnu to transform himself into a beautiful female belly dancer. Very sensual, very sexual dancing. And so he was going to the gods first and giving them, the bowl that had the nectar of immortality, and he's dancing, and he transformed himself into this beautiful, sexy woman. And so all the terrestrial gods, they're completely distracted, and they completely forgot about that. They can't stop watching as she dances around. And so the plan was to drink it all themselves and not give any to the terrestrial gods. But Rahu, the snake, he knew better, and he had been given permission. So he disguised himself as one of the gods. I don't know exactly what he did. He sat in between the sun and the moon, which is the soul and the mind. And as it was coming around, he got the nectar of immortality. And as he's drinking it, the sun and the moon look at him and say, "He's a demon, kill him!" And Vishnu chops his head off. And so he had in his mind all of his obsessions of how he was going to rule the universe, and all of the wives and the husbands he was going to have, and all of the concubines, and all of the money, and all of the drugs, and all of the influence, and the parties, and all the fun he was going to have. And then his head gets cut off. And so all he is he's nothing but obsessions and addictions. He can never physically play out any of his desires. Now his body is Ketu. Talking about Ketu now. Ketu is his body. Ketu has no ambition, has no vision, can't see, has no desires, doesn't care about anything. Is pure emotional and physical reaction. So Ketu represents the shaman, specifically representing how somebody with their body, they can channel a deity. So here you can see possession. Whether, negative possession, being possessed by a negative entity, or at the very least being influenced by spirits. And as you know, this is technically what, the term, when we talk about shamans, this is what a shaman does. A shaman will go into trance and channel a deity. But it also means tremendous empathic abilities. So this is something that I have. When I go into a room, I can feel with my body what's going on, especially what's going on the unconscious level. I can feel it. Somebody walks up to me and they're talking to me, all I can see and feel is what the unconscious issue is. It drives me crazy, because I want to point it out to them, but it's unconscious, meaning they're totally unaware of it. That's one of the problems I have, especially when I do spirit fighting and things like that. It's like I can just walk into a room and I can feel everybody's stuff, and it drives me crazy. So that's what Ketu does. So if you're one of those people where you can feel everything that's going on, it could be the moon, because the moon is very empathic as well. But if it's one of those things where it's like you lose your identity, that's because this is Ketu. So for me, in my D9 chart, which is as I get older, this is the fruits of what I'm getting. In my D9 chart, as I said, in my 8th house, I have Ketu and Moon together. So that means my mind is very easily influenced by spiritual connections, which makes somebody a great shaman. It means that as I'm getting older, I'm getting a deeper connection to the gods, and the ancestors and the spirits can speak to me. So that's why I'm doing this as I get older. That's why I didn't do it when I was younger, but I'm doing it now. So this is what Ketu does. So let's say if Ketu is in the first house, that means the person, Ketu, if Rahu is all of your desires and your ambitions, Ketu is all the stuff you don't care about. In fact, it's trying to take you, it's trying to rip you away from that. So if Ketu is in your first house, it means that Ketu is trying to take you out of your physical body. You look in the mirror and you don't see yourself. It's like, who is that? Is that me? You don't feel a connection to your personality, your name. Somebody calls your name and, what, oh, me? Because you don't have a connection to your identity. If it's in the fourth house with the moon, then you have a real hard time connecting to your mind. In fact, anywhere, if it's with your moon, it means that it takes you out of your mind. And I was talking about this. This is Trump. Trump has, in his fourth house, moon conjunct with Ketu, which means that he can't he can't feel his emotions. I mean he can't exactly what I'm doing right now. This is Ketu in the mind. It's like you can't stay with one thought for too long. He's very easily influenced. Whatever it is, the last person that talks to him is the person that will influence him the most. In fact, I'm reading about this, that, with all the changes that's happening in the White House, he doesn't have all these people coming in and giving him gossip. Because the White House staff coordinator, whatever, is General Kelly, is keeping a tight lid to make sure that people just can't walk in and just start dumping information onto him. Because he's so easily influenced, and that's Ketu. Ketu takes him out of his mind. His mind is incapable of focusing. He's very emotional. So that means whatever emotion is hitting him, that's what he responds to in that moment. He makes decisions very impulsively based on whatever he's feeling. So this is what Ketu does to the mind. If you've got Jupiter in there, then Ketu and Jupiter will make somebody a really deeply spiritual person, where their spiritual proclivities, which is Jupiter, their deep spiritual mind will go even deeper and take them completely out of this world. So these are some of the things that Ketu does. Ketu is about, if Ketu is in your 12th house, it may mean that you're going to be out of here. This is your last life. Now, that's, a bunch of other things have to be there, but that's at least, at the very least, you're going to be thinking about, yeah, I'm done with I'm going to be out of here. Wherever Ketu is, Ketu wants to take you out of it. Or it says that you've mastered this. So in my case, Ketu in my birth chart is in my 5th house. 5th house is another house of deep knowledge and study and spirituality. And so this is why a lot of times I can look at information and just sort of intuitively know what it is without even thinking about it. I can explain to you exactly what that myth means. Because Ketu says, yeah, I've already figured this out in a past life. Here's the answer. You don't need to study, just here's the answer. 5th house is also children, so I've never wanted children. Ketu says, yeah, we did that in past life. You've already had kids. But I also, whenever I go out in public and I see little kids and I talk to little kids, mothers go, oh my God, you make such a good father. You should have kids. Well, that's because I did it in a past life. I mastered it, which is why I can interact with kids really well. But I sure as heck don't want that. So Ketu takes you away from whatever he's connected himself with. Ketu, on the downside, is racism and terrorism. Which, by the way, racism is a form of terrorism. I don't know why racists can't figure that out. But, I mean, that's what you do. You try and scare people of other races. When you walk around with your wrong understanding of our spiritual symbols, when you walk around with those, you're trying to scare people. You're trying to scare them simply because of their race, or their ethnicity, or their spiritual background, or their sexual preference. This is what terrorists do, and it's because they don't have a head, meaning they don't care about their life. So this is why we have suicidal bombers. That's Ketu. Ketu says, I'm going to give my life for this. I can't think about it. I haven't thought this belief through. It's a completely physical, visceral, emotional belief. You know, that's why when I try and talk to people, I say, what are your emotional agendas here? You know, because if you can't identify your emotional agendas, then they will just drive you. And so Ketu in a negative light is somebody who is completely driven by their emotional agendas with no forethought. Their mind is completely disconnected. They have no idea why they believe what they believe. It's just really in their body, and they're willing to give their life for it. They will blow themselves up in order to kill a bunch of people based on some feeling that they have, and they don't even know why they have it. That's the worst aspect of Ketu. So these are some of the aspects of Ketu. I don't know if I answered your question, but if somebody is feeling like their, depression could either be Rahu, which we'll talk about next. It could be problems with the moon. It could be all kinds of things, but it could also be Ketu. Ketu could be pulling the mind away from that. Okay, so let's see. Any other questions here? All right. Looking for the questions. Looking for the questions. Sorry, I have to do this. When I do this, it throws me to the bottom and I have to scroll up. Can you talk some more at some point on how to surrender the intellect to emotion when the time comes, perhaps via your experience learning spirit fighting? Well, Alan has a good thing. Alan makes a good point. It is important for me to share my experience, because experience is a good way for the intellect, because the intellect loves stories. So it's a good way for the intellect to then follow a story and then get led to an emotional experience. So, yeah, keep reminding me. Nothing's coming to mind right now, so I don't want to falsely manufacture something, but, spirit fighting and connecting to the emotions, that's a great, I'll have to do that. I don't feel connected to that right now, but please keep asking me that so that I can answer that question for you. Awake Maven says, for a reading, what if you don't know the exact time of your birth? Oh, that's the problem. There are things called birth time rectifications, which isn't me, I don't have that ability. Somebody's going to ask you a ton of questions, and based on your questions, be able to tell you exactly where your planets are and different things. So, yeah, go find your, I think everybody can find it. You just have to either go online or go to the hospital or contact the hospital where you were born and ask for the birth certificate, an exact time. I think you can. I think you just have to do some work to find it out. Alicia Cole asks, is there a specific Norse deity equivalent to Rahu Ketu? Loki is Rahu. To be honest, I don't know who Ketu is. Ketu is kind of all by himself. I would have to do some more research, so I don't have the answer on who Ketu is. But if in doubt, Loki can work for both of them. I say that squinting, but anyways, Rahu is definitely Loki. I don't know who Hyperboreans are, so I don't know if I'm answering your question. Romneon Germany says, so basically most celestial gods were egoistic and didn't deserve immortality by their behavior, but took nectar away. I didn't say that. I mean, I can see why you'd come to that conclusion, but I didn't say that. The celestial gods are definitely very proud. The sun is a celestial being. So yeah, the celestial, I mean, they're very bright, and I mean, this is why we've got people who are conservative, like conservative heathens, say, I worship the Aesir. Well, that's because they have a really strong connection to their ego and to the left side of their brain, the right side of their body. So that's why I say sometimes the gods are like children, because they're very black and white in their thinking, they're very extreme in their thinking, but that's because they're so expansive with they're bright, and when we look at them, the celestial deities get us connected to our own ambition and the things that give us, feelings of spiritual righteousness, and I'm overwhelmed with feelings that's the celestial gods. So yeah, they have a strong connection to the ego, but I wouldn't say at all they didn't deserve immortality. I wouldn't say that in the slightest. They were acting, however they acted. Anyway, so Alan says, is there some correlation between Ketu and one's dwarves? I'd have to know again why you're asking that question. It's there's something that you're trying to figure out with your dwarves with that question that you're relating to Ketu, which I'm not picking up on. I don't understand it. So yeah, there is a correlation, but I'd have to know more specifically and look at somebody's chart. So generally speaking, I'm not going to say that Ketu is a strong connection to dwarves. So I can't answer that. Wow. Yeah, people arguing with each other. I'm not going to get into that. Okay, let's see. All right, looking for the questions again. Looking for the questions. Okay, it's best if you put actually a question mark so I can see it. What? Notorious Northman. Is there a heaven, Asgard, Mount Olympus, Nirvana? Is there? Yes. Yes, there is. Each tradition has its own way of describing it. And now, I don't know if you're calling me or somebody else a commie, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not going to go there. All right. What do you mean by dwarves? Okay, so DS15 full, you're obviously new to my channel. So I'm not going to get into that now. Go on and you've got to watch my videos. So the dwarves have a strong connection with your subconscious mind and your ability to intend. That's as far as I'll go with that. But there's a whole... Watch my videos. Again, anybody new to this, who's just coming on to this, in order to really understand what I'm talking about and to get the most out of my channel, you've got to put some effort into watching my videos. Some of my best videos have almost no views. I'm telling you, it's pure gold. But, talk about Ketu. YouTube is really strong with Rahu and Ketu. Rahu and Ketu, they will come and they just want to get your attention. And so people now, especially people, we're talking about Rahu, we're going to talk about Rahu in a second. Rahu is the internet, communication on the internet, instant communication, is going on and Googling something and instantly knowing an answer to something. That's Rahu. Rahu is definitely the internet. But one of the things about the internet is that it gets your attention. Your attention is always being drawn away with whatever shiny thing is in front of you. I'm bored with this. I'm going to go on to another video. There's a whole thing of videos here on the side, and I'm looking at this, and oh, that's an interesting one. Let's look at that. Okay. And then, so if you really want to get the most out of this channel, go onto my channel and look at the videos. Look at them. I'm saying that because, it'll really help you a lot in terms of not only what I'm teaching, but in my opinion, spirituality in general. Okay, so okay, I don't know. See, yeah, this is what happens. Again, guys, it works best if you ask me questions. I can't stop you from arguing with each other and talking to each other, but it just takes that much more time, then I don't know who's talking to who and all that. I would just prefer to see questions on there, but I can't force that. I can't. That's one thing I can't control. One of the things that I teach you is don't waste time worrying about things you can't control. That's a real quick way to get uncomfortable fast. All right, so we've just started to get into Rahu, and Rahu is next. Rahu wants to be the most important. He wants to be the last planet to be talked about because we do live in the age of Rahu. So for all intents and purposes, that's kind of true. So I'm going to put Rahu on here, and then I'll do a little bit of ads, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this up with a bang. Okay, so Rahu is last today. Rahu wanted to do that. I was looking for him, and he, as I was putting all this together, he sort of hid behind everything else, and so that forced me to talk about him last, which is appropriate because Rahu is the leader of this modern age for sure. So Rahu in the Norse mythology is connected to Loki. He would be representative of any of the trickster gods. And Rahu, you know, even though Rahu is technically a malefic planet, meaning he's negative, Rahu can give tremendous gifts. That's because, again, remember the story we talked about. Rahu had his head cut off right as he was drinking the nectar of immortality, thinking about how he was going to get every single one of his desires met. And so he spends a lot of time thinking about how to get things. So one of the things that Rahu does is that Rahu will always finds the shortcut. He wants the easiest, fastest way to get something done. That's why Rahu is the god of the internet, because that's what the internet is. It's getting what you want right away. Now the downside of that is you end up with a whole society of people, especially people who have grown up with the internet. You know, I didn't. My first, when did the internet come out? I don't know. I had to have been in my 30s. So first, you know, really 35, 40 years of my life, we didn't have really internet. I didn't make use of it until only recently. And so I had to, you know, you grew up and you hear people, and back in my day, we had to dial the phone, and we didn't have these gall darn phone machines there where you could leave a message. We had to wait for them to get home, and if you were there and you picked up the phone, you had to write down a message on a piece of paper. And so you had to ask when you came home, are there any messages? Right? But nowadays, you don't have any of that. I mean, it was a big deal when we had, when answering machines came out. And you could leave a recorded message on a tape. That was such a big deal. Now we got these things here, which can do everything. It's what Star Trek wish it was. So when you've grown up with that, it definitely takes a toll on your ability to get up off your ass and do something for yourself. It changes your ability. And on a serious note, it has real problems in terms of the brain's ability to function. You have to do things with your hands. You have to physically do things. Even writing things down with a pen and piece of paper. If I was a teacher, I would require that people took notes with a pen and paper, because that has a connection with the body and the nervous system and the brain, and it helps the brain learn in ways that it needs to learn. And when you take that away, you have a lot of people who are stuck in their head, just like Rahu. Their head is cut off and they're floating around with no practical connection. But so that's the negative side of it. But the positive side of it is if Rahu is working for you, he gives you immediate access to everything. I talked about this when I looked at Trump's chart. Trump has Rahu and Sun in his 10th house. 10th house is the house of career and fame. Rahu wants the best of everything. So when Rahu is in your 10th house, it means that you're going to want to become king of the world. Now, when Rahu and Sun are together, it means that your ego is going to be completely consumed with your obsessions. So if you're obsessed with ego, when Rahu and Sun come together, it means now we're talking ego. Ego completely, totally out of control. And that's in Trump's chart. And I've had people say this to me. I'm not taking a side at this moment, but I've had people say, I'm voting for Trump. I know he's totally egotistical, but I'm going to vote for him. I know he's a total narcissist, but I'm going to vote for him. Even when you know that that's his flaw and his failing, because it's so powerful in his chart, I mean, some people just can't overcome the desire to make him king. He's destined for it, destined to be king of the world. So this is what happens when Rahu comes together. Now, when you get Rahu and the moon together, this can cause insanity, this can cause demon possession, this can cause drug addiction, because then the mind, which is your mind is where your thoughts are going. So when Rahu gets in there, then Rahu clouds. He is the eclipser. He will eclipse the mind so that the mind cannot receive light from the spirit. So Rahu can make somebody a criminal, or he can make somebody the deepest spiritual guru on the planet. It just all depends on who he's with. What he does is he expands, he explodes whatever he's with. So that's why Rahu and Sun, ego out of control. Rahu and Jupiter, under right conditions, can make somebody the deepest, most expansive spiritual thinker on the planet to see into the deepest depths. Because one thing Rahu does, because he's got all this time on his hands, he has a lot of time to think. So he's got a very strong intellect. You get Rahu and Mercury together, you've got somebody who can come up with the perfect advertisement that will go viral and to go all over the world. Here's the one word: where's the beef? I don't know if you remember that back in the 70s. Where's the beef? That was a tagline that just went so viral for a long time. So Rahu is definitely, this is one of the reasons I do this work, is because Rahu is in my 11th house in Gemini. So Gemini means that Gemini is the outward expression of Mercury, which is communication. And so Rahu is there in my 11th house, which means Rahu wants to give to my 10th house, which is fame. Your 11th house gives to your fame. So Rahu in Gemini says that I want you to communicate and get your fame through the internet, because Rahu is the internet. So when you get Rahu and Mercury together, you got the internet. But when you've got them connected, like in the 8th house or the 4th house or the 12th house, you can have a deep, really deep thinking shaman. You can have a master magician. You could have an incredibly psychic person. One of the things that Rahu is brilliant at is seeing trends. So Rahu knows what the trend is. So if somebody's got Rahu and they want in their chart in such a way where they can be an advertiser, Rahu will give them the ability to know what the trend is that's coming and to be able to get ahead of it. You know, I shared about this. I came up with a movie idea and I let people talk me out of it. And I did it another way and the movie didn't work. But as it turns out, the movie idea I had was a trend that was just about to come into fruition. So who knows, if I had done the movie the way I originally wanted to, which was Rahu telling me how to do this movie, you know, I could have been the next big movie maker. Who knows? But this is one of the benefits of Rahu. Rahu is probably the worst because at the negative, what Rahu will do is he will make you obsessed. He will bring you into your obsessions. He has no morals, so he has no problem breaking laws. So if you have Rahu and Saturn together, like Rahu and Saturn and Mars together in certain ways, you can have, you know, just like a serial killer or, you know, horrible kinds of other things. Anyway, so these are some of the aspects of Rahu. Let me see if you guys have any questions about any of this. All right. Let's see here. Looking for the questions. Again, I have to scroll through all this stuff. It makes it hard to find the questions. Okay. Romney in Germany says, I saw a question mark. Is this even a question I need to answer? Okay, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question. I don't know what that's about. Alicia Cole, Rahu in the 1st house. Well, it's going to depend on... It's going to depend on what it's with. Rahu is your obsessions, your desires. So, for instance, if Rahu is in the 7th house, which is in the opposite, then somebody is going to be really focused on relationships. So if Rahu is in the 1st house, it means that you can be either Rahu will eclipse your identity. Again, depends on if there's any other planets in there. So on the negative side, it could eclipse your identity so that you can't really connect to your true identity. But it can also make you really desirous. It may make you want to show the world who you are all the time. Here's who I am. Here's my identity. So again, it depends on, you know, which house and where he's at and what other planets are there. So those are some thoughts in my experience. All right, so I think those are all the questions so far. Okay, so again, the best way to get the most use out of all this information. Because again, let's bring it back to what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is spiritual abilities. So let's talk about spiritual abilities again. I went over it in the beginning, but let's go over it again. Spiritual abilities, psychic abilities, healing abilities, being able to read minds, being able to move energy, being able to move things, being able to whatever you perceive to be a spiritual ability is. Spiritual abilities are not an indicator of spiritual advancement. In fact, my experience is that spiritual abilities are the opposite. Spiritual abilities show you what karmic debts you have. So if, let's say, somebody does have a gift, a psychic ability to be able to tell the future or to be able to look into other people's hearts or to be able to whatever a psychic does in your definition, then that would mean in a past life this was somebody who withheld information. This is one possibility. So this is somebody who withheld information that wasn't helpful to others, because of some, like you were using that information against them. So that means in this lifetime, in order to balance that out, people are going to come to you because they need information from a psychic perspective, and so you have to reveal that information to help them along the way. If you have a healing ability, it means that you harmed people in a past life. And so the way you balance that out is the people that you've harmed will come to you for healing. So if you're a healer and you heal thousands of people, then that means you've harmed a lot of people in your life, in many lifetimes. You've got a lot of people, you got a lot of karma to balance out there. So there's nothing wrong with that. So now, listen, I'm obviously making this video because people want to know what their spiritual abilities are. So in order to enjoy your spiritual abilities, you can't judge yourself for that. But it's important to know that, listen, you also can't get wrapped up in them. Because if you get wrapped up in them, then you're getting wrapped up in your old negative karma, and it's going to be that much worse. And I've heard stories of healers who got wrapped up in their ego, and then what ends up happening is they get sick. There's karma for you. I can think of one guy, in fact, one guy is coming to mind, that had a lot of spiritual ability and healing ability. And he allowed himself to be seen as an ascended master and a bodhisattva. And even though he would publicly say, "Oh, I'm nobody," he would then secretly go around and, like on the internet, put up a fake profile, and then argue for himself or brag about himself or whatever. And so the universe says, "No, we're not going to let you get away with that. You're supposed to heal people, not get wrapped up in yourself." And so, boom, he got sick. So, the same is true for all of the other spiritual abilities. I had an ability for a while where I could use my energy to in martial ways to either barely touch somebody or to not touch them at all and make all kinds of strange things happen. Well, there's all kinds of karma connected to me with that. I also had to make sure that I had to. The universe was really clear. It said, you've learned this to be able to help people, not to hurt them. And so I had to make a vow that under no circumstances would I ever, throughout my whole life, ever use my martial abilities on another person. I can't do it. And I even made the further vow. I said, I'm never going to be in a position where some innocent person is going to need protection. So I'm never even going to manifest a scenario where I have to use that. So I have to do this to be helpful to people and to use that knowledge and that ability to actually protect people on an energetic level. So that's my karma of that. So again, it doesn't mean anything. But if you want to learn what your spiritual abilities are, again, there are two ways that I recommend it. The first one is one we've been talking about this whole time, which is find an astrologer, a Vedic astrologer, who can show you in your chart, explain to you. Like, for instance, somebody, was mentioning, they feel disconnected from their body. So I would be able to take a look, and if, let's say, for instance, Rahu and Moon in the first house, that would mean that you would feel disconnected from your identity, and you wouldn't be able to focus your mind on who you were. You'd forget who you were. What's my name again? Who am I? That's, and you could feel like, gosh, why am I so disconnected from who I am? I feel like I'm crazy. Nope, it's just Rahu. The lesson is saying, Ketu is saying, hey, listen, you're not your identity. You're beyond that. So let's not focus on that. If you have Rahu and Moon in the 8th house, then you're a very powerful shaman, but you're going to have a very hard time being able to filter out. You're just going to, at the drop of a hat, go into another realm and see spirits and visions and ghosts, and you're not going to be. You're going to need somebody to tell you you're not crazy. This is a gift. And so when we have these things in our charts, for instance, somebody has the gift of healing, he or she is supposed to go out and use that gift to help people. They, on a selfish level, they have to balance their karmic debts to other people, but they also need to do their job and go out and heal. So it is important to know what our spiritual gifts are, even though we can't really take credit for them. We do need to know what they are so that we can do our job. So, that's why I offer this service. Go to astrology.thunderwizard.com if you want me to show you in your chart where the planets are telling you what your strengths are. And then on top of that, I can show you how to take that information and specifically what you can do with the planets and with the deities and with the energies in order to turn that fault into a strength. Turn that negative into a positive. Now, the other way that is perhaps a quicker way to do that is to connect directly to the ancestors with life force energy, and to get your vibration up to a level where you are working directly with the ancestral masters, where you are pulling life force energy directly into your mind, into your body, into all of your meridians, and into your aura. And when you have a buildup of enough life force energy into your aura, what's going to happen is those karmas are going to get popped open like a blister. It's like popping open a blister. All of a sudden, you're out of nowhere, you're going to have a spiritual ability that you didn't have before. So the way to do that, that I know of, is to use celestial qigong. And to learn more about that, go to qigong.thunderwizard.com. And there are some videos there I tell you exactly where this came from. And this was something that wasn't supposed to get out. This is one of those teachings that you weren't supposed to have, you weren't supposed to know. Wasn't supposed to get out. And in my experience, people who have done it, when they do it consistently, one of the things that happens is they get a knowledge of a spiritual ability that they didn't know that they had. It gets activated. But it's being used in direct connection with the celestial masters. So it's like having a celestial guru, or not actually, sometimes it actually is, a celestial guru come down and teach you how to use that ability, how to practice that and use that. So that's what that celestial qigong is for. So I don't know if there's any more questions. If not, we can go ahead and wrap things up. Let me take a look and see if there are any questions. Rahu and the Sun. Yeah, Rahu and the Sun. I think we talked about that. Rahu and the Sun is, depending on where it is, it's definitely the ego being eclipsed by your desires and your obsessions. It depends on which one has the highest degree. So I talked about Trump. Trump has Rahu and Sun in his 10th house, and Rahu has the lowest degrees, which means Rahu is winning the battle. When planets are conjunct, it means they're fighting for dominance. If they're really strong planets, they're fighting with each other. If you have, like, let's say, Moon and Mars together, then Mars is going to be influenced by Moon is going to be influenced by Mars. But when you have two strong planets like Rahu and Sun together, they're fighting with each other. So it's the soul and the ego, the selfishness. And, the soul has a strong connection to the ego on a spiritual level. But when Rahu comes in there and swallows the Sun, then the person's ego becomes completely focused on the material and all of the, the negative, the empty material pursuits. So if Sun is on the lower degrees, that means that Sun, that thing is still there, but the soul is trying to overcome the negative physical mundane attachments. The Sun is trying to bring the person into connecting with their highest self. Okay, so I'm not going to answer that question. Not even going to touch that one. Okay, you said in your other videos that our next destination is to become elves. Will we live on that plane? How do we become an ascended master? Well, the way you become an ascended master is to live your life in such a way where you are constantly working towards your own evolution. Now, the easiest way to answer that is to follow that which brings you in alignment with your deepest soul desire. Everybody has it, even though some people say, I don't know what my soul desire is. You all do, for whatever reason. Something's inside of you is blocking you from that. But your deepest soul desire is what gives you the greatest joy. When you follow, listen, that you don't have to do anything else. You know, sometimes we can use these other aids like celestial qigong and mantra and runes and astrology, and all those things are tools to help us. And sometimes we need that. I need them. I use them all the time. I need them. I highly recommend them. But if you're able to, anybody who can simply connect to their deepest soul desire and constantly take action on their joy, and take action on their joy in spite of what everybody else wants them to do, and only follow what brings them true joy, then you will become an elf. That's the fastest way to do it. Now, what's important to understand is that, you know, somebody asked me, what if my greatest joy is cheating on my wife? Somebody actually asked me that. And I said, that's not your joy, because that is, you know, that in order to do that, you have to hide, you have to lie, you are very likely causing harm to somebody. You're causing harm to yourself because you have to lie to yourself. All that energy that could be going into what it is you really want is going into hiding something and lying to somebody else. So that's not your true joy. Your true joy, when you are following your true joy, it's going to be something that's going to make everybody happy as well. Now, some people are not going to respond well to it because they are there to be a lesson for you. So you're going to intimidate some people. Some people, you know, my ex-wife, when I was living with my ex-wife, when I followed my joy, it threatened her because she saw that, you know, that I was going off and hanging out with other people and doing other things, and she wanted me at home with her all the time. And so it was a threat. So I had to make a choice between pleasing my wife or following my true joy, and I chose my true joy. She's very happy now. She actually has her perfect husband, and I wasn't. So that was the best thing for her. That's just one example. But when you follow your true joy, you will have to go up against your own ego attachment about pleasing other people. You are going to have to do that, and you're going to have to learn the difference between getting other people's love and following your true joy. Sometimes, like, you know, with me and my girlfriend, it's a perfect combination. The more I go after what really makes me happy, the happier and more turned on she is with me. So she's my perfect partner. Because the more I do the thing that makes me happy, the happier she gets. So to understand that, we've got this book here, The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life, I think it's called. Yep, that's what that book is called. So that teaches you all that there. Okay, so let's see if I answered that question. So, what is that? I don't need that. Go away. Let's see here. So yes, we are all destined to become elves eventually. So you don't have to try and make it happen, Maricel. It'll happen. When you said, will we live on that plane? Yeah, you will live on that plane. You know, when you ask that question, I could be wrong, but it feels to me like you're asking that question because you want to be there now. So I want to be clear about something. The only way to really live your life is to be where you are. And so spirituality should never be used as an escape. True spirituality is going to get you more firmly implanted within your body, within your soul, within this moment right now. And anything that tries to take you out of that is potentially harmful to you. So don't worry about the elves. They are always there, by the way. They are always there. You can face northwest and simply ask for help, and the elves will guide you towards following your highest destiny. So they want to help you. But the short thing is to live. The short answer is to be living with as much maturity as you can. That's the fastest way to connect to the elf nature and to become an elf. An ascended master. Let's see. I'm going to look for questions. If I don't answer your question, it's because I either don't have the answer or I don't think it's relevant to what I want to say. So let me scroll up here. I hate it when it does this to me. Alright, so what does being able to move and feel energy well mean about your past life? I don't know what it means about your past life, but it means that probably your moon has a strong connection with your physical body. I'd have to look at your chart to see. Because I have moon in the first house, which means I have to move. Like physical things, or, you know, martial arts katas, or, you know, drumming, or something that gets my body moving in order for me to express my emotions better. My emotions have to I have to physically express them in order to feel comfortable emotionally. All right, again, looking for the questions. Okay. All right, so no more questions, so I'll go ahead, and we're at 3 hours. Once again, the time has flown by, so I'll go ahead and wrap things up here. So I think I sort of answered what I wanted. Let's talk about the light body again, because, again, all of this stuff, listen, the planets, our energies are here to help us achieve our highest state of existence, our highest state of vibration, which some people call the light body. And so, you know, all of these things are tools. I love having as much information as I can have. I love having as many tools as I can use in order to get practically to make this work and make my life better. But here are some things you can expect when you're connected to the light body. The whole point of this whole shebang is joy. There is no higher state of evolution than to be in joy. You cannot be in joy and not be in the present. If you're thinking about the future or the past, you're not having fun. You're not in joy. I'm also hammering away at, you know, the highest realm of existence is to be able to intend your reality. Now, that doesn't mean, like, you know, when I was talking about magic earlier, that doesn't mean just being able to force your will onto your environment. That is not what I mean. I mean being able to intend. First off, you have to be conscious of what your highest joy is. Be in alignment with your true soul, your deepest joy, and then being willing to project that at all costs. This is what my ancestors called dying in battle. Being willing to die in the process of living in the moment what gives you the greatest joy, from one moment to the next. And you will have to die. You will have to die to your ego. You will have to die to yourself. You will have to die to other people's expectations. You will have to die to your attachment and your agendas about what you want other people to give to you. You will have to learn how to go after your deepest joy at all costs. You know, people die over it. It kills you. People who go out of their alignment, it can kill you. So staying in true joy and being able to intend your highest reality. To be able to know what that deepest joy is and then be able to intend it. So again, I'll go ahead and you know, put a last minute pitch for these two tools, which I think, 3 tools. First off, this book here. The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life will teach you how to find out what your deepest joy is and how to live it. And not only that, how to be free of disease, how to be free of, you know, all kinds of, you know, all the things that block you from having everything you want in life. And then going and getting a Vedic reading from me. You know, again, people wait. And I'm coming into the fall now, so it's going to be hard. But all these people who have waited and say, you know, I'm going to save up, or when are you going to give a discount? And I say, don't wait, because my prices are going to go up. And sure enough, they did. Don't wait. You know, if this is really important to you, you can find a way to get the money. Seriously. But I would recommend getting an astrological reading. Go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. Now, in terms of the most powerful energy tool I can give you, which will also bypass a lot of this and get you directly into connecting to the celestial masters, but on top of that, it will give you an instantaneous connection to life force energy, in my experience. And it is the fastest and most powerful way to connect you to life force energy. It will give you a connection and an ability to awaken whatever your spiritual ability is, which is this. Go to qigong.thunderwizard.com. Excuse me, qigong.thunderwizard.com. Qigong is spelled QIGONG.thunderwizard.com. That is, again, stuff that I was not supposed to, according to my teachers, I was not supposed to give that out. This was secret, and the world was not supposed to know about it. But this will definitely, you know, you won't have to take ayahuasca. You won't have to you won't have to spend years and years and years trying to figure out, you know, how to connect to life force energy or connect to the ascended masters. That is really, in my experience, the fastest way to do it. All right, so that's it for now. For those of you who want to learn deeper practices of shamanism, go to thunderwizard.com. That's my my advanced shamanism course. When you sign up at whatever level is comfortable for you, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, keep clicking more until you get to the first lesson. Start from there. I give out very specific and in-depth teachings on how to use the thunder wheel, and how to tap into the 5 elements, how to tap into all of the gods, how to access shamanically all of the 9 worlds of the world tree. Incredibly powerful practice if you're really serious about connecting with the gods, connecting with the deities, learning how to use your shamanic abilities to not only reach your highest level of awareness, but to affect the world around you. I teach you what real magic is, how to really use that power to connect to the universe and affect the world. This is part of one of my goals. If you believe in what it is I'm doing here, I invite you to support this channel. You can go to support.thunderwizard.com and just support it directly. The easiest way to get something out of it is to go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe at whatever level, because that is something that comes to me every month. And my goal is to be doing what I'm doing now, to be able to, be on here every day doing videos and answering questions. And so the more that I am able to be supported, the more time and energy I can put into doing this, which is what I want to do. So that's it for now. I'll do a last minute check for any last minute questions. See if there's any last minute questions here. Not seeing any questions. Nope. All right, so there we are. We're done for now. My friends, let's see. Yeah, okay. So we're done for now. I think I've said everything I need to say. Yeah, listen, the effects from this eclipse are not over. I can still feel it. Like I said, I very rarely have issues happen to me, and when all this stuff happened, and let's see, we just recently had Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Rahu together in Leo. All that energy cramming together in Leo, which is my ascendant, which means my physical body. And sure enough, my back went out on me. That hasn't happened in years. So this is, I know I'm not the only person. There's more effects coming from this eclipse. So the more that we can take advantage of these tools and align ourselves with these energies, the better we'll be able to work through these changes and not only be able to weather them, but to use them. That's ideally my choice. Anyway, that's it for now. I will stop babbling. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. Have a happy Labor Day to all those of you in the United States. And I look forward to our next connection to you, my friends. Thank you so very much.